Thank you for joining us today. The American Parkinson's Disease Association, mHealth Fairview, and the Parkinsons Foundation are thrilled to have you with us in person and watching online. Our three organizations are proud of our collaborative work to serve the Parkinson's community of Minnesota with our symposium. Here is a map of all of our registered attendees, and it is great to have people joining us from coast to coast. Today's program is being recorded, and we will email all registered attendees the link to view the recording along with resources that we talk about today. A few housekeeping items. This is a Parkinson's friendly program. There's no problem if your cell phone or pill timer goes off. And if you're uncomfortable, please feel free to step to the side or the back of the room and listen while you stand or stretch. We will have a break at 10:40 a.m. And if our online audience has any difficulties, please write it in the Q&A. After each presentation, we'll take a few minutes for questions and answers. A big thank you to our silver sponsor of today's program, Medtronic. You may visit their table in the lobby, along with our other supporters and community organizations. And with that, let's get started by sharing a little bit about each host organization. My name is Anushka Sheel, and I'm the Information and Referral Coordinator for the American Parkinson's Disease Association Minnesota chapter. APDA's mission is that every day we provide the support, education, and research that will help everyone with Parkinson's disease live life to the fullest. And it's just so nice to see you all here today. Thank you to everyone who's joined us in person and from home through Zoom. I just wanted to provide a short summary of APDA Minnesota's activities over the last 2 years. We transitioned from in-person events pre-pandemic to virtual and now hybrid events. We offered a collaborative virtual symposium in summer 2020 with PF and the UDALL Center, and a collaborative virtual symposium in fall 2020 with APDA Wisconsin and Iowa. Those programs are available for you to view online on our website in case you missed them, as well as our 2021 winter, spring, and fall symposiums. We offered several other virtual programs, including 2 powerful tools for caregivers class sessions, 5 press support groups for people newly diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and 1 virtual Connecting Through Art program. You can stay up to date on the programs we offer by emailing us to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter. We celebrated a virtual Optimism Walk in September 2020 and raised just over $40,000. And we were able to return to an in-person Optimism Walk in September 2021, and we raised over $54,000. We're really excited for our 2022 Optimism Walk in Roseville on September 10th, and we have a fundraising goal of $45,000. You can visit us online to learn more about the walk and to sign up. The money raised at the Optimism Walk goes to support programs and services like this one, and including the APDA's financial support program. We've given out over $200,000 in financial support to people with Parkinson's disease since 2016. We awarded $40,000 in 2020 and $44,000 in 2021. And we've awarded $16,400 so far this calendar year. And we have more applications coming in every day. I encourage you to get connected with us. You can call our Information and Referral Center with your Parkinson's questions at 651-241-8297. And you can also connect with us through email and Facebook and through our website. With that, I want to hand it over to Erin at the Parkinson's Foundation to introduce their organization.
Thank you so much, Anushka. Can I just say how exciting it is to be together and online with people connecting? Hello, I'm Erin McGee, Senior Community Program Manager for the Parkinson's Foundation, Minnesota and Dakota chapter. We are the nation's largest community for people living with Parkinson's, those who love them, and those who work to end the disease. The foundation makes life better for people with Parkinson's by improving care and advancing research toward a cure. In the last 4 years, we may have slowed down a little bit due to the pandemic, yet we have reached more people by offering programs virtually, like today, to continue to pursue our 3 goals for today, tomorrow, and for all of us. We strive to improve care for everyone with Parkinson's. The Foundation's global care network is guiding the future of care by creating opportunities for people with Parkinson's to access high-quality care. Recently, the Foundation announced the expansion of this network by increasing the numbers of centers of excellence to 60, while adding a new level of designation, the Comprehensive Care Center, for medical centers providing outstanding clinical care and resources to people living with Parkinson's. Struthers Parkinson Center is our local center of excellence. We advance research toward a cure. In the last 60 years, we have funded more than $400 million in groundbreaking research, fundamentally transforming the way we diagnose and treat Parkinson's. Since 2010, the Foundation has supported more than 613 scientists researching Parkinson's. Lastly, we empower and educate our global community with support, resources, and programming. The Parkinsons Foundation is a trusted ally for information at every stage of Parkinson's and offers resources that provide life-changing support to people living with this disease and their care partners. Visit us at parkinson.org, call our helpline at 1-800-4PD or 473-4636 to answer your questions and any caregiving questions you may have or resources. You'll find that information in your folder today, and we'll be sending that out to our online viewers as well. The Foundation continues to bring the entire Parkinson's community new educational programs and resources to bring support, including expert briefings, podcasts, a Parkinson's library of resources, and PD conversations, an online community for people living with Parkinson's and their caregivers, and those who are newly diagnosed. And with that, I'd like to welcome Summer to share more information about the UDALL Center at the University of Minnesota to introduce their organization.
Thanks, Erin. So I'm Summer Amundsen Huffmaster. I'm an assistant professor at in the Department of Neurology at the University of Minnesota. And spring is in the air, kind of, today. So maybe you're getting a little bit like me, getting a little antsy for some travel. And so today I'm going to try to take you on a little research road trip around the U of M to show you some of the work that we've been doing through the UDALL Center of Excellence. So Morris K. Udall was a member of Congress who was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And in honor of him, the UDALL Act has been signed into order so that we can support research throughout the US on Parkinson's disease. So just like any good road trip, we need a goal. And today my goal is to take you around the U to show you some of the really great work that we are doing and some of the things that we're about to do. Before I start, I just want to give you a little bit of overview of deep brain stimulation therapy, which is our research focus at the UDALL Center. Deep brain stimulation, or DBS, is when an electrode is planted in the basal ganglia of the brain, and a wire goes under the skin to a pacemaker implanted in the chest. And DBS can be very effective for some people for treatment of Parkinson's disease symptoms. And here's a person who, before and after DBS, you can see a very, a really strong impact for him. However, there's a lot to be desired for DBS treatment, and that's our goal, is to improve the treatment of DBS for people with Parkinson's. The overall goals of our study are to understand the changes in the brain that occur with Parkinson's and how those changes relate to symptoms, and to design more effective and individualized DBS therapy. Our research should help people with and without DBS, but with Parkinson's disease. Much like everyone's faces are shaped differently. Our brains are also shaped slightly differently. And so likewise, with Parkinson's disease, everyone has different symptoms. And so the goal of our research is to improve DBS and tailor that DBS to different people's symptoms. Some symptoms, like gait and balance, are more difficult to treat than others. So the UDALL team at the U of M is a large group of people, and I'm not going to mention people by name. You can see each group of people listed here is a large team of people working to support DBS research at the U. I'm just going to give a sampling of some studies today that we are doing. So stop one on our research road trip is the Brain Imaging Center, or MRI. There's debate over the optimal place to put the DBS electrode, and even more debate on the optimal site within each brain location. So what they're doing at the MRI is they've improved the resolution of images. So you can so that surgeons can put the target in the right spot in the brain. Where they're going is they're looking at how within a certain part of the brain, the globus pallidus or the subthalamic nucleus, each of those has specific areas or regions that seem to control movement in blue, emotion in green, or emotion in red, or thinking in green. And you can see here are 5 different people's brain structures, and the colors are in slightly different places. So we're working on individualizing that, the placement and the way that we apply the DBS. Stop 2, we're going over to the engineering building where they're building models of the brain. So the brain is full of complicated circuits. We could imagine it like this crazy intersection of highways, and you need a map to get to the right place on this intersection. And so what they've done is they've tracked the neurons across different parts of the brain using computer models from the 7T MRI to create a map. Where they're going is they're identifying areas and pathways on the map that are important for motor symptoms like walking and non-motor symptoms like thinking. Stop 3, we're going to decode those brain signals. So in our externalization study, we are listening to the brain, and I'm going to see if this audio clip will work. Let's see if you can hear it. Nope. Okay, so there's no audio, but as the person is moving, there we go. Thank you. UAV. So as the person is moving, you can actually hear their brain, and you can see that it's changing in relationship to that movement. So our group is using directional leads to manipulate motor symptoms with DBS, and we're working on closing the loop. So updating the stimulation throughout the day based on the symptoms and the brain activity that's actually being recorded. Okay, stop 4, evaluating outcomes. This is the lab that I work in, so welcome. Our work has shown that the stimulation in certain parts of the brain can be effective for motor symptoms that do and do not respond to medications. This is important for improving things like walking without giving up control over things like tremor and rigidity. What we're going to do next is continue to look at improving motor and non-motor symptoms through DBS. So, just like any trip, we need fuel. And that fuel comes from 2 things. 1, federal funding. So your taxes support our research. So please continue to support science research from the US. And in particular, I would like to thank the NIH and the NINDS, along with Dr. Walter Koroshetz and Beth Ann Sieber, who've supported our work. The second, and possibly even more important thing, is research participants. So the work that people have participated in the past has fueled the technology that we have available today. And so if we want to continue to improve deep brain stimulation technology or just our understanding of Parkinson's, we need you to come and participate in our research. So everyone with Parkinson's is a little bit different. So if you want to help somebody like you in the future, please come and volunteer in our studies. Now, we've talked a lot about DBS research at the U today. There's all kinds of research being done. So even if you don't have DBS, if you've just been diagnosed, if you have a really severe disease state and everything in between, there are lots of studies that we could find a good fit for. So some are big, some are little. So please reach out and see if there's something that fits your time and availability to help support the Parkinson's community. If you're interested in getting involved in research, here's your little personalized roadmap or a triptych for any of those of you who used to have AAA. So if you're interested in getting in research, you can go to our website, or you can see Kelly Brown, our research nurse, who's here today. You can sign up and she will help you find a place that is a good fit for you. And you can also email her if you're not here or you have to leave early or anything like that. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a great turnout, and it's very nice to see everyone's faces in person and then also virtually as well. My name is Dr. Christine Domingo. I'm one of the movement disorder specialists at mHealth Fairview. Thank you so much, Summer, for that brief, talk about research and its importance. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Her name is Dr. Svjetlana Miocinovic. Dr. Miocinovic is a board-certified neurologist specializing in Parkinson's disease and other movement disorders. She graduated from medical school in 2009 at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, where she also obtained a PhD in biomedical engineering. She completed neurology residency in clinical movement disorders fellowship at University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. In 2016, she moved to Emory to become an assistant professor in the Department of Neurology, movement disorders, and in 2021, she became an investigator with Emory's UDALL Parkinson's Disease Research Center of Excellence. Her research has been funded multiple times from the National Institute of Health. After viewing her pre-recorded presentation, she will join us virtually for a Q&A session. In addition to that, I also would like to thank NINDS for their funding towards the University of Minnesota UDALL Parkinson's Disease Center Research Center of Excellence for their contributions in the UDALL Center and Parkinson's disease related research. So without further ado, let's turn over to Dr. Miocinovic, her presentation.
Good morning. My name is Svjetlana Miocinovic. I am a movement disorders neurologist at Emory University in Atlanta. And it is my pleasure to speak to you today. I will tell you about some exciting new developments that we've seen in recent years in deep brain stimulation. I have no disclosures. So I know that University of Minnesota has a very active DBS center. And many of you are very familiar with this therapy, but just to make sure that we are all on the same page, I will spend some time telling you a little bit about basics of deep brain stimulation. And then I will describe some recent advancements that we've seen in the clinic. There's been a lot of exciting new developments in recent years. And then I will share with you some research efforts, again, in the field of DBS and how we are making it better. So DBS is best described as the pacemaker for the brain. So it consists of implanted electrode that is implanted in the motor part of the brain. And then there is a wire that goes underneath the skin and connects it to a pacemaker. The pacemaker is implanted underneath the skin in the chest, and the pacemaker sends continuous electrical pulses into the motor brain areas and normalizes function there. And here you can see an X-ray of a real person, and you can see how these electrodes look like in real life. So DBS is an established therapy. It has been around since the 90s. It was in fact FDA approved in 97, first for Parkinson's tremor, and then later on for other Parkinson's symptoms. And it is used for different conditions. So depending on the condition, the electrode may be placed in a different part of the brain. And most recently, it was even approved for epilepsy. But for movement disorders, it's considered standard of care. We've used it for the last 30 plus years, and it is covered by insurance. How do we decide if somebody is a good candidate for DBS in Parkinson's disease? Well, first criteria is that the person needs to have what we call idiopathic or levodopa responsive Parkinson's disease. That's the garden variety Parkinson's disease, as opposed to some close relatives of Parkinson's disease. And then a person should have at least one of these three complications. So either motor fluctuations, that's wearing off and on, levodopa-induced dyskinesias, those are those fidgety, involuntary movements, or tremor that does not respond to medications. So if you're probably familiar with this motor fluctuation, somebody who's had Parkinson's disease for maybe 5, 10, 15 years knows that they have their off time before they have taken their medications, and then they take their medications, they feel better, they may even get dyskinetic, and then as the medication wears off, they go through this off period again, and then they can cycle like this throughout the day. So what DBS does, it basically smooths out these fluctuations. So the lows are not as low and the highs are not as high. The contraindications or exclusion criteria for surgery are dementia, severe psychiatric mood problems, any medical contraindications that would make brain surgery difficult, and then also unrealistic expectations. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So here's a video of one of our patients here at Emory. This is a man who here is in his 50s, and he developed Parkinson's disease fairly young. So I'll show you, you can see his classic tremor, and he has a lot of bradykinesia, that's the slowness of movement. And then for him, the biggest problem is actually freezing. You can see he's trying to walk here, but his feet are just glued to the floor. Once he gets going, he's pretty good, but then you'll see as soon as he starts to turn, again, he experiences this severe freezing. So as you can imagine, this is pretty disabling. So his symptoms do improve with levodopa. However, levodopa only gives him about 1 hour of good on time. And so this is when we decided he would be a good candidate for DBS. And here you can see him with DBS on. So no tremor. His speed of movement is much improved, and you can see he's walking and turning without much problems. So this is an example of what DBS can do. Oops. So a little bit about DBS equipment. So it consists again of this brain lead or wire that is implanted inside the brain. And these are the metal rings or contacts that the current is passed through. Here there are 4 contacts. Here is the pacemaker or the battery that's implanted in the chest. And then this is the clinician programmer that the doctor uses to communicate with the device to set the stimulation settings. And then a patient also has their home programmer that they can use to turn the device on or off or to make small adjustments. So this is a schematic of the brain, and you can see here, these are the targets that we use in Parkinson's disease. So this is the subthalamic nucleus or SPN. This is one of our most common targets. You can see it's a pretty tiny nucleus deep inside the brain. Sometimes we also use globus pallidus, and then sometimes also thalamus. So these are different areas of the different motor areas in the brain where we can implant the electrodes. So the way surgery is done typically is what we call an awake state. So the person is asleep for any skull drilling and skin cutting, but then once that is done, they're also placed in this metal frame. So you can see this metal frame is bolted into the head, and it holds the head perfectly still, because that's important that the head doesn't move so the surgeon can target very accurately. And so then the person is woken up in the operating room. And this is important because before we place the DBS electrode, we need to make sure that we are in the right part of the brain. So we use a test probe and we record brain activity to make sure that we are in the motor part of the brain. And then also when with the person awake, we can then test the stimulation and make sure that symptoms improve, tremor goes away, etc. And so if that sounds scary, it's really not. So here is an example. This is from a couple of years ago. We had a patient who you can see him lying here, and this is an intraoperative CT scanner. And this patient, he was an engineer, and he was, during surgery, he was asking a lot of questions. You know, he really wanted to know what we were doing. And so one of our surgeons, this is Bob Gross, he pulled out his neurosurgery textbook, and then he was showing him in the middle of surgery, you know, this is what we're doing, that we are in this part of your brain, etc. So we have fun in the OR. Now, for some people who being awake in the operating room may be very difficult, for example, young children, or even people with Parkinson's disease who have severe anxiety or severe off symptoms, there's now option of doing a sleep DBS. So what that means is that the person is under generalized anesthesia, they're completely asleep, and the surgery is actually done inside an MRI scanner. So this MRI scanner is turned into an operating room. And instead of doing that, those brainwave recordings, now the surgeon is monitoring where the probe goes on MRI. And so this is an alternative way of doing DBS, which can be just as effective. Now, I always tell my patients that surgery is the easy part, and it's really DBS programming that can be difficult. So DBS programming refers to finding the best simulation settings, and this has to be done for each person individually, because everybody's brain is a little bit different, everybody's electrode is in a slightly different place, and everybody has different symptoms. So we spend several months, up to 6 or even sometimes 12 months after the surgery, fine-tuning these simulation settings. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about DBS complications. So it is, even though we call it minimally invasive, it is brain surgery. So the most feared complication is a brain bleed. So this happens in about 1 to 2 out of 100 people who have surgery. Luckily, most of the time, we only see blood on the CT scan or MRI, and the person doesn't necessarily have any symptoms. But every so often, very rarely, the person can have stroke-like symptoms from the bleeding. A little bit more common is infection. So anywhere between 3 and 10%. Infections can develop around the pacemaker or even anywhere there's an incision or a wire. And those can usually be treated with antibiotics, but very rarely we may have to take out the entire device, wait for everything to clear up, and then put it back in. And then there's a variety of stimulation-induced side effects. So stimulation itself can cause side effects, but that's where the programming comes in. So that's why we adjust the stimulation settings to avoid those side effects. So what does a DBS do for a person? Well, number one, it's really good at reducing tremor, reducing dyskinesias, and improving stiffness. It also improves speed of movement. It reduces wearing off. So those on-off motor fluctuations are smoothed out. And overall, it increases the quality on time. So the on time is the time when the person feels good, when they're functional. People can also reduce their medications. And we know now with experience where people have had DBS for 10, even 20 years, that it provides continuous benefit for those symptoms. Now, what are DBS limitations? Well, it is not a cure. So it does not slow down or stop Parkinson's disease. It is a symptomatic treatment, but the disease still continues to progress in the background. It does not replace medication. So that's not, everybody always asks me if they can stop their medications after DBS. And usually the answer is no, we can reduce them oftentimes, but really DBS works best with medications. DBS may not improve balance or freezing or speech and swallowing. So that's something we also have to consider. And DBS will also not directly treat non-motor symptoms. So it will not improve memory. It will not improve depression. Now you can imagine if somebody's tremor is better, they may be sleeping better and then their memory is better because of that. But there's no direct effect because, again, we're implanting DBS in the motor centers. And DBS does require battery change every 3 to 5 years, or now we have rechargeable batteries that need to be charged weekly. So a wireless charger is placed over the chest. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you about some new developments that we've seen in the last few years. So DBS was developed by your own local company, Medtronic, now 30 plus years ago. And but in the last 5 years, 2 other companies have come to the US market. So that's Abbott, formerly St. Jude, and Boston Scientific. So ever since then, there's been a lot of technological developments because it's essentially been an arms race between these companies who can develop a better product. So it's actually been very, very good for patients and for clinicians. So one of the developments that we've seen that we're now using in clinic are directional or segmented leads. So traditional DBS leads, as I've shown you before, is this electrode that has 4 metal rings. And you can imagine that the electrical field is spreading symmetrically around the electrode. So here, if we're here in orange is the subthalamic nucleus, this is our target area. But you can see here, if we turn on the electrode to activate the subthalamic nucleus, there is some spillover into the surrounding areas. And this is what causes side effects. So we don't want this. Now, in order to avoid that, these new directional electrodes can shape the field more finely so that we don't spill over as much into the areas we want to avoid. And so now we have these segmented electrodes from all 3 companies now have them available. And so what they look like, they don't have 30 little segments like I showed you in the previous picture. They actually look like this. So they have, so the bottom and the top contact are regular ring electrodes like they were before, but these middle 2 levels are split into 3 segments. So now we don't have to turn on all 3. We can actually only turn on 1 or 2, and then we can shape the field and have it not be symmetrical, but be more towards one side or the other, depending on which way we want it to go. And so this type of stimulation is not necessarily more effective for treating Parkinson's disease, but it reduces side effects. So here there was a study a few years ago where they compared side effects using the regular circular ring mode. And then with the directional stimulation, the side effect threshold was significantly higher. So now that means that we have more room to play with and we can adjust the stimulation higher to provide benefit. So the next development that we've seen are these chronic brain recordings. So this is now only available in Medtronic Percept device. And what this means is that in addition to providing stimulation, like all the DBS devices, they provide stimulation. With this device, we can now also record brain activity. So those inactive DBS contacts, because we only use maybe 1 or 2 contacts to deliver stimulation, we have those extra 2 or 3 contacts that we can use to actually record brain activity at the same time. And I'll tell you a little bit more later why that is important. But here's an example of what we can now see in clinic. So here, this is from a person who was implanted with one of these devices. And you can see here, this is time. So this is 15 minutes. And this is power of the brain waves. And here you can see that when the stimulation is on, this data power that I'll tell you a little bit more later about is reduced. And then when the stimulation is off, it goes up. So the point is that we can now see in clinic in real time what is happening in that person's brain in terms of brain activity, brain waves. This is something that we've so far only been able to do in the operating room when we have the wires available to us, but now we can also do it in the clinic. And the third development that I wanted to tell you about is the remote programming. So this is an option that's so far available only with Abbott devices. And so what that means is that with traditional DBS devices, the person had to come to the clinic and then the doctor had to connect with the wire to be able to make any stimulation changes. What this means is that the person can be at home and the doctor can access their device remotely. So you can see here, it's done using the patient controller. So the patient has to be the one that allows access. That way it's safe, so nobody can hack into your DBS device. So the patient initiates contact and then contacts, this then is beamed over through internet and the cloud into the doctor's programmer. And then here, in addition to being able to change settings, the doctor and the patient can also see each other and they can make changes. So this is something that has really, we've realized how important this option is in times of pandemic, when a lot of people couldn't come to the clinic, clinics were shut down. So this is something that is potentially really, really beneficial. Okay, so now we'll spend a little bit of time telling you about some recent research efforts. So DBS is very complex procedure. There's a lot of steps, a lot of moving parts. And so I will tell you about two research efforts to improve programming and to improve stimulation. So in terms of programming, so again, that's that adjustment of stimulation settings that we do for the first few months after surgery. So right now, the way we do it, we basically do it by trial and error. We try something, the person goes home, then they come back a couple of weeks, couple of months later, they tell us this is working, this is not working, then we change it again, they go home. It requires highly trained technicians, clinicians. So neurologists typically do this. And also it requires patient input. So the patient has to tell us what they're feeling, what their how their movements are. And it's very time intensive. So in one study, they estimated it takes about 18 to 36 hours per patient, one-on-one time with the clinician to find the best settings. So we did an interesting research study in my group where we said, well, can we actually teach a computer how to do the programming? And if this is something that we could do, that means that DBS would potentially be applied even outside of big DBS centers. Maybe more people can have access to it if it's simple, if the programming is simplified. So we did a small study with 10 patients. And what we did, we had patients wear a smartwatch. So the smartwatch has a built-in motion sensor. And so we used that built-in motion sensor to measure tremor. And then that tremor signal got automatically beamed into a computer via Bluetooth. And then computer processed it and said, okay, there is this much tremor, and then automatically beamed a command over to the pulse generator and said, try these settings. And then the pulse generator would change itself, and then the person would again hold their arm up, and then we would measure tremor. So we did this multiple times automatically. So there was no doctor that had to change the settings. There was just a technician that had to had to run the computer. And then we said, okay, and then we told the computer how to change the settings. There was an algorithm that the computer was applying. So it said, if there's this much tremor, then change it to this setting. If there's that much tremor, change it to other setting. And then we did this closed loop programming. And then at the end, we saw, well, are the stimulation settings that the computer comes up with, are they just as good as what the doctor came up with? And this is exactly what we saw. So these patients already had their optimized settings. So we knew what their best settings were. And they were actually very similar to what the computer came up with. So we weren't trying to show that the computer is better than the doctor. We were just trying to show that, hey, computer can be just as good as a movement disorders neurologist for programming tremor. And so here, this is the 10 patients, and this is their tremor using their clinical settings. And then this is their tremor using their automated computer settings. And you can see they're very similar. In fact, for some of them, maybe computer did a little bit better, but on average, statistically, it was about the same. And then we also asked patients if they preferred their clinical setting or their computer setting. And then you can see some of them preferred the computer setting, the automated setting, some of them preferred clinical. This one poor guy, nothing was helping him. His tremor was pretty severe, so he didn't really like either. And then the other thing that we found was that the automated computer settings actually used less power, so they weren't cranked up as high. And we don't really know why that is, but we were able to achieve the same therapeutic benefit with less energy. So this was a study that we did a few years ago. And the way we did that study, we basically kind of did similar programming that's done in clinic. We basically went through each option, so kind of brute force, grid search. We went through all the simulation contacts, all the simulation amplitudes, and then decided what is the best setting. But then we said, well, we can do better. Can't we use something like artificial intelligence to come up to a best solution faster? So this was our second project that we, instead of going through every single option, we said, okay, we're gonna use artificial intelligence, specifically Bayesian optimization algorithm, to not try every single setting, but to really kind of use intelligent approach to find the best setting faster. And so we implemented that and we tested in another 15 patients. And this is what we found. So when DBS was off, obviously tremor was pretty severe. And then the automated setting was just as good as their regular clinical setting. And then we compared, well, how long did it take us to find the best setting using the brute force approach? It took us on average 25 trials until we found the best setting. But using this artificial intelligence, we were only needed to test about 15 settings. So that means that the programming was 40% faster using the artificial intelligence approach. So we were very happy about that, and we'll publish these results soon. Okay, so the second research project I wanted to tell you about has to do with the day-to-day stimulation. So the programming really is something that we do at the beginning, but stimulation is delivered every day. And the way that stimulation is delivered, it's continuous, so it doesn't change. And you know that Parkinson's symptoms change throughout the day. So if medications are working, the symptoms are less severe, and maybe the person doesn't need as much stimulation. Or if they're sleeping, Parkinson's symptoms usually go away in sleep, so the person doesn't need as much stimulation when they're sleeping. But right now, the way stimulators work, they're just constantly on at the same settings. And so we think that that's leading to side effects, and it also drains the battery faster. So ideally, what we would want is to have some sort of signal that would tell the stimulator, oh, this person needs more stimulation now, turn it up, or they're feeling good right now, turn it down. And there is one such signal that we can record from the brain itself. So it's called beta power. And so some of you may have heard about beta power being elevated in Parkinson's disease. So this is a brainwave recording from a person with Parkinson's disease. And you can see there's a lot of these big spikies. So that's the beta, that's this abnormal or excessive. So everybody has some beta power because beta power is involved in movement. So everybody has some beta power, but people with Parkinson's disease have too much of it. And so these spikes are too high, but when the person is given levodopa or when DBS is applied, then this beta power goes down. So now we know that the beta power is potentially a good marker of how much Parkinsonian symptoms there are. And so this is what was proposed to be used as a control signal for adaptive DBS. So adaptive DBS, the idea behind it is that instead of the stimulation being continuously on, it would actually change depending on how much stimulation somebody may need. So the way this works is we would record brain signals. Again, now going back to that device I was telling you about, the new device that can record brain activity. That's why they developed it, so we can do something like this. So the DBS device is recording brain activity, and then from this signal, it can extract how much beta power there is. So this is the beta power signal. And then we just can put a simple threshold. This is a threshold line, and tell the device whenever beta power is over the threshold, apply the stimulation. If the beta power is low and we know the person is not having much symptoms, then don't apply the stimulation. And so this is what's called adaptive DBS. And so this was tried in a research study a few years ago. And here the results are showing that with no DBS, the UPDRS, the Parkinson score, was pretty high. So the symptoms were pretty severe. But then when adaptive DBS was applied, it was just as good as continuous DBS. But the key is that it was on only half the time. So it was using up only half the battery power. And it wasn't, and some more recent studies have actually shown that it may also be helping with side effects. So this is something very promising that we're all very excited. It's very challenging from engineering standpoint to implement this. So this still hasn't come to the clinic, but we hope in the next few years, this will be available in the clinic as well. So to summarize, I've shown you today that DBS is a standard of care therapy for Parkinson's disease, specifically for motor fluctuations, tremor, and dyskinesias. There have been many new technological advancements available in the clinic today. These are directional leads, chronic brainwave recordings, and remote programming. And some of the new advancements that are in the pipeline are automated programming and adaptive DBS. And here is a picture of our whole team at Emory. So it's again, DBS is a big effort. These are people I work with every day. And I am happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Miocinovic. That was an excellent talk about DBS. I'm sure we all have a lot of questions, so we'll start our Q&A session.
I have one from our online audience, wondering if you can speak more about your experience with patients and the remote programming options, especially ease for both patients and clinicians, effectiveness, reliability, compared to the in-person programming.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the question. I have to be honest. So I actually have not used remote programming as much. I've tried it in a clinic a few times. So I cannot give you my personal experience. As the pandemic sort of cleared up, we were able to see our patients in clinic. So I have seen most of my DBS patients in clinic. And but again, I think it's a great option for people who live far away and who it may not be easy to travel. But I personally just have not used it as much, so I can't give you my personal opinion.
Another question from our online audience. What are your thoughts regarding the mini implants, the new DBS system, I believe?
I'm not sure. You said mini implant?
Yeah, mini implants in regards to the lead or the battery. I just did a quick pull up and I saw like an article came out this week from the BBC regarding the mini implants.
I'll have to look that up. So that's not something. So there have been efforts to try to miniaturize things. So, to try to have the battery be implanted, a small battery be implanted in the skull so there's no wire going down. But none of that is currently available in the clinic, but there's definitely a lot of efforts to make things smaller. So I'll have to look that up myself.
Okay, thanks. Our online audience is just has lots of questions to be asked. Can current leads be changed to new leads to improve spillover?
Yeah, so that has been done. There has been some studies published where people who had regular cylindrical, symmetrical leads have been replaced with directional leads. So if somebody is constantly running into problems with side effects and their doctor cannot adjust the stimulation appropriately, then yes, that is an option. So before we would, reposition the lead in that case, but now in addition to repositioning the lead can also be exchanged with the segmented lead. So yeah, that's definitely an option for people who run into problems.
We'll take some questions from the audience now.
For a person who's had DBS done on one side and they're doing a wait and see, as time goes along, it's been 2 or 3 years now, and it becomes harder and harder to balance the difference between the medications and the operation of the DBS. With the programming where you turn it down and at night, is that going to help them with the ability to sleep? Right now, my wife's having a lot of trouble getting any kind of continuous sleep during the night. Is that one of the things that will improve with the DBS that's slowed down or shut off at night?
That's a great question. So a lot of people with Parkinson's disease have trouble with sleep, and we don't really know how DBS affects sleep. There have been some reports and some patients, I know they tell me like, oh, I sleep so much better now that I've had DBS. But we don't really know. And some people, the DBS may disrupt sleep. So, it's difficult to say if your wife's, sleep would improve if she had one of these adaptive devices. Maybe I wouldn't try to replace it just for that purpose until we have more information, because again, even in people who don't have DBS, sleep is a big issue. So we may probably need some better treatments for sleep.
Svjetlana, let me just add something real quick.
Mhm.
We are doing sleep studies at the University of Minnesota. So if you're interested, contact our research nurse and we'd be happy to put you in contact with her, because we are looking at the effect of DBS on sleep and actually
Great.
comparing the two sites, ST
this
and
is-
GPI. So to your question,
This is Dr. Vitek, Gerald Vitek. Thank you for joining.
We have another question over here.
Thanks for doing this presentation this morning. I have a background in IT and programming, and I imagine that the sensory data that you've been able to gather over the last few years with the new devices produces just huge volumes of data that are difficult to interpret. With the AI approaches that you've taken to analyzing this data, has anybody done any research around applying deep learning tools to try and focus on developing algorithms to help optimize DBS therapy?
Yes, excellent question. You should come and work in my lab. So yeah, we've been trying that. You're right. Now we are having these massive amounts of data that we can record, and the question is, well, what do you do with it, right? So yeah, so we have been, applying machine learning approaches, and that was sort of the project that I described with using Bayesian optimization to do the automated programming. So, and we're applying that also to the brain wave signals that we record from the brain. So yeah, absolutely. This is a huge, big research area right now. Again, not just for me in my lab, but also DBS researchers around the country. And I think that will ultimately be the way to go to apply these machine learning approaches and really to get a good grasp on this data and be able to utilize it effectively.
I have a question from our online audience as well. How have you been able to actually use recordings from devices like Medtronic's Percept?
Yeah, so we are still learning. So it's been a few months now that we've been using Percept Device in our clinic. Like what it was just mentioned, you get a lot of data back, right? So we're trying to still get a handle of how we can use it. One thing that I found to be useful is to actually, in real time, you can monitor when you turn the stimulation on, you can monitor how the beta power changes. So, and that can sometimes help you choose between two different stimulation contexts. You can see which one gives you more of a beta power decrease. And then that can actually, sometimes, you're not sure just by looking at the person's symptoms, which contact you should choose, that can help you. But again, there's some limitations when you do these recordings. You can only do that for two of the four contacts. So you can only really explore two of them because of some technical issues. But that I found that actually to be useful. But again, we're still learning. I think there's going to be a lot more now that this device is available clinically and it's being implanted all over the world. I think we're going to be learning more and more in the next couple of years.
I have a question in the audience.
Oh, hi there. I'm wondering, can you talk about any advancements in lead placement or getting the lead to where you need to do, as opposed to the segmentation, which helps the lead once it's there, but critically more getting the lead to where it needs to be?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So we have some efforts on that front as well. I didn't share that today just because of time, but yes. So placing the lead in the right place, I mean, that's the critical part. If the lead is not in the right place, I mean, you know, you're not going to get much, if any, benefit. So, and right now, the way it's done, usually a neurologist is in the operating room with the neurosurgeon or a neurophysiologist, somebody who can interpret these brainwave recordings. And that is a highly skilled procedure. And again, it's only limited to these big DBS centers, so we can have these big teams where this extra intraoperative assistance can be available. So we're trying to find ways to make that simpler. So one of the ways we're doing it is that we can we can record a brainwave and then automatically, instead of having a person interpret what they're seeing, have a computer algorithm just interpret it automatically and say, like, this brainwave recording looks like it's in an appropriate location and this one is less appropriate. So we're developing these automated tools that somebody, you know, maybe a general neurosurgeon who doesn't necessarily specialize in DBS could eventually use it. And that way DBS would be available even outside of the big DBS centers.
So we'll take one more question right here, and then we'll have to wrap up for our next.
Yeah, you mentioned typical side effects to DBS surgery. Could you explain those a little more? What are the typical side effects?
Well, the side effects of surgery itself, again, the main one is brain bleeding or infection, because now you have this device permanently implanted. It's a foreign body, so it can create an infection, and then just implanting the device itself can cause bleeding. Those are the main ones. There could be additional ones. Some people can have swelling in the brain, seizures, but that's from the procedure itself, right? So just getting the device in and then having the device be in place. And then there are stimulation-related side effects. So that's, you know, when you turn on the current and now the brain is being stimulated, it can create problems with speech. It can create problems with walking, tingling, muscle cramping. And again, that's what, so there's various, you know, sometimes mood changes. People can get really sad or really happy. So that's where the neurologist works with the patient for several months to make sure that those are minimized, and then that only the stimulation provides mainly the benefit.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miocinovic. We really appreciate your time and the information you've shared. For everyone, if we haven't gotten to your questions, please write them down. We have an mHealth Fairview table. Come to any of us and ask your questions. We welcome them. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Miocinovic.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Svjetlana. Thanks for getting on from Atlanta.
Sure, my pleasure.
All right, I'm excited to introduce our next speaker, Joan Hlas. There we go. She has been a social worker for 17 years and is the manager of the Center of Excellence programs at Struthers Parkinson Center, a Parkinsons Foundation Center of Excellence in Golden Valley, Minnesota and St. Paul, Minnesota. Joan has presented at numerous patient and professional conferences, as well as submitted posters at 2 World Parkinson's Congresses. In her free time, Joan loves the outdoors and camping with her family. She has several trips planned this summer, including the UP of Michigan to kayak and the Painted Rocks National Park. So let's welcome Joan.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you. Okay. Oh, got it. Okay, thank you. Nice to see everyone. It's fun to be in person again, isn't it? This is my first major conference in person again in the past 2 years. I have a display out there and I said, I haven't gotten this tablecloth out in 2 years to use it a display. Anyways, thank you. Anyone been to the UP of Michigan? Kayak the Painted Rocks? Yeah? Or Pictured Rocks, is it worth it? Okay, good. I'm excited for that trip. I have a 12-year-old and my husband and I love to get outdoors. It just helps you feel whole again. In the midst of the pandemic, it's been kind of a lifesaver for me. So hopefully we're all ready, even though it's been a rough spring. Okay, so I get a topic that it can be a little tricky, right? As I look at the crowd, I see a mixed bag of folks living with Parkinson's disease. And so anytime us professionals get to stand up here, we have to recognize we have a mixed audience. Some of you have lived with this disease. I think I met someone 17 years and it's probably even longer. Some of you are probably more recently diagnosed. And so as you hear this stuff, you have to funnel it. You have to figure out how you're going to work it. It can let you down like, oh my gosh, what's the fear of the future? Or it can feel comforting, like this is us, I'm ready to take this in. So you just have to kind of piece it and recognize that I'm aware of that, okay, as we shift through. My objectives today are to understand the common progression of care and needs in Parkinson's and what might bring about that change. We're also going to talk about more typical things of getting care in the community and then resources to help you get there. Okay, I often use the analogy that Parkinson's is like riding a roller coaster. And I found this picture of a roller coaster. I liked it because it had a lot of different tracks. Some of you might be on a track that feels like it's level. We're doing okay. We're here. Treatment works well for us. We're living a good life right now, but it might take a dip. You don't know. Others, it feels like it's constantly going around those circles. There's no tunnels in this picture, but sometimes it feels like there's a tunnel, like you don't know what is coming. You can't see what's happening in front of you. Okay. The key is to know that people are there along to support you. Conferences like this, all those fine folks in the main lobby are here to support you on your journey on this roller coaster ride. Okay, there's a lot going on in this slide. I recognize that. But a couple key things as we look at it, you will see in the blue, we got steps. I often describe care as steps. So we start down at the bottom. In the steps, in the little squares, are what you might need assistance with, okay? And it will grow as time goes on. In the little boxes more in the middle, you will see, oh, looks like my slide got a little, anyway, sorry about that. You will see what might help you along the way, okay? So let's, again, everyone's journey is going to be different. Some people will take this one step at a time, and others might feel like they're at that bottom level and all of a sudden they're up here because something significant happened to them. Okay, the goal is to try to do this thing slow and to predict it. As a social worker, see, I talk with my hands. As a social worker, my goal is to walk this slowly with you and to give you tools along the way instead of like, hey, I met you, and then a couple of years later, many years later, oh my gosh, we're in crisis mode. You know, like kind of regular checks in to make sure we're hitting each step. So down at that bottom step, some of the first things that people might need help with are more like coaching, organizing, just keeping you on task for things. You know, figuring out, okay, you take pills 5 times a day or 4 times a day. How are you going to remember to take those pills? What's a good system for that? So it's a watch, it's a phone alarm, whatever. Someone that might kind of guide you through some of those things. Okay. It also, the next step up from that might be trying to maintain the world around you. So getting chores done around the house. You know, if you've always been the lawnmower and the snowblower, and that's trickier now, how can we find help for that? Okay. Or if you've always done the taxes and the finances, and now that's getting hard to maintain all that, do you need a little support? Do you need someone to either do it for you or to help you figure out a better system so it gets done? It's all online billing, automatic payments, things like that. Now we got a tax guy, you know, so because I can't do the taxes myself anymore, or whatever it might be. Okay. Then we're going to get into where it is going to be a little bit more critical. Driving is getting harder, dressing, more motivation for activities. It feels like there's a whole lot more sitting around. And so someone needs to kind of do a little prodding to get you going and doing things. Now, some of these problems are going to be because of physical limitations. That tremor is constantly going, so it's really hard to do any sort of fine motor task. Or some of them might be more cognitive changes. Just takes longer to process information. And so someone to help with that might be there. And then the next stage might be more that actually walking, transferring to and from, more of those personal cares. And then that final stage is going to be just someone that needs to kind of support almost most of the things you're doing. Middle of the slide shows how you might get this help. For many people, I've been fortunate, I've been at Struthers for 17 years. A lot of people figure out their own group of people, their core people. Folks might have family members, maybe it's a spouse that has been with you for 50 years and they're going to continue to be with you. Okay, maybe it's a really good friend that has just walked every step with you, or it's an adult child. I've seen a lot of dedicated, both adult daughters and adult sons helping people out. Sometimes you have to look at where that help is. Are they right here? That daughter lives 5 minutes away, or she lives with you, okay? Or they live across the state. We can do a lot of stuff via phone and text and on the computer. So it's kind of looking at where that family and friend support might be. A lot of people have great churches that they belong to that really step up and provide support. The next level might be more you're paying now staff. So it's home care or companion care. Again, my slide, I think, got mushed. So it says PCA in that thing, personal care assistant. Adult day programs, so places where someone goes for the day to do activities. Okay. Next step might be where being at home isn't working anymore. A lot of times those in-home help, adult day programs can help people stay at home for a real long time. And I have seen people stay at home the entire journey of Parkinson's. Okay. But sometimes that just doesn't work. Whether it's the environment, it's that you're a single person or your caregiver can't help you out, then they might move to assisted living and then the next level to long-term care. Okay, lots of different options here, and I'm going to get more into that as we click through these slides. So people often ask me, this is probably one of the main questions when I know someone wants to talk about the future and planning, how will we know when it's time to do this stuff? Okay. So I have a couple key things that I'll click through in the next couple slides here. First one is looking at the level of assistance. So how much and what type is needed? Is it just someone needs to kind of check on you to make sure you're, again, take pills on time, right? Getting those pills in you and you're taking them and you're following, right, dosing and all that kind of stuff? Or is it someone physically needs to help you out of a chair because it's just gotten so hard? For some, it is a set standard. And so one of the big questions there is, can the help be on a regular basis or varied? Just by a show of hands, how many in the crowd have on and off times? Like they clearly are on and then they clearly are off. Anybody? Okay, a few in the crowd, many of you not. Okay, doesn't happen to everyone with Parkinson's, but plenty of people have their good times when those meds are kicking in, and then they have times that aren't so good. So if that's you, then care can be brought in on those times when you're not great. Okay, a lot of you, I bet, though, don't really know. You can't predict that. And that's the trickier part when we think about giving someone help, is that we just don't know. 2 o'clock today, I'm great. I'm in a great mood. I can get done what I need to get done. 2 o'clock tomorrow, nope, I'm down for the count. I'm not getting anything done today. So it can be a little tricky when we think about how do we help someone. But those are the kind of conversations that you might have within you as a person with Parkinson's, your family, your people around you, your team. And then you might bring it to the doctors and folks, social workers that you're working with to try to help kind of see where you are, okay? A lot of times therapy can be used in those points too. The occupational therapy can assess how you're doing with some of your ADLs to determine what level you're at. Then one of the big key things about whether we need help or not is safety, okay? We know for many people with Parkinson's, falling is a reality. Not everyone will fall. Some people are the balance is great, but for many, it does come a reality. And if it does, we have to look at how often it's happening. What are the things? Why are you falling? What are the key things? Our next speaker's on freezing. That's a pretty common symptom. And so if that's you, You know, can things be adapted so you're not falling, or is this kind of the reality of what life is going to be like? And then, can someone be left alone? This is a key thing I often ask, particularly of that spouse where the two are together. You know, are you leaving your loved one alone? And they'll be like, oh, well, about 3 hours. I'm comfortable, you know, going to lunch and maybe a quick errand and then I'm back. Okay, great. Or some are like, yeah, maybe a half a day. I'd never leave them overnight. I wouldn't leave them alone overnight. You know, most people kind of have in their mind what they're sort of comfortable with, particularly when they're coming to me for this conversation. They have it in mind anyways. But what I often encourage people is to try this every once in a while. A lot of people have been married for, you know, a long time. My parents, they were married for 60-some years. They're always together. But we do encourage them to kind of have their thing, you know, and I think a lot of times I talk with my patients about that. You need to have time apart from each other to kind of see. And one of the reasons might be to see how your loved one with Parkinson's can do on their own. You know, and sometimes it's about, they can be left alone when they're content, like they've done their morning, get ready stuff, routine, and then they make their way into their easy chair. They got their TV remote, they got their book, their word puzzles, whatever they're set with, meds are right there, bottle of water's right there. They're content for quite some time. And that's great. Okay, so then the spouse can go about and do their thing. For others, that's trickier, particularly if there's some cognitive changes. So you have to kind of look at, you know, what's the safety abilities, how long can someone be left? A couple other factors is activity level. Some people, they know they need folks around them. They're social people. They need to interact with folks. And if they don't, it's really going to hit them. We know the realities of depression and anxiety and Parkinson's disease, they're very real, okay? And we know that when people are kind of left to their own devices, so sitting and not doing much all day, depression and anxiety are going to get worse. I know many folks have told me how much when they just kind of sit around, they kind of wait till the symptoms happen to them. And they can feel them more. But when you put them in a program or put them in something where they're active, feeling productive, talking to others, connecting, all of a sudden, they hardly notice that these symptoms are going on. So at Struthers, we were fortunate for many, many years to have an adult day program right in our building. It's currently on hold, future is yet to be determined. But during that program, we had people at various spectrums of Parkinson's. And I did the intakes for the program. We would bring people in and they'd be like, oh, Dad is not going to want to do any of this stuff. He's going to want to nap most of the day and he's not going to want to paint. He's not going to want to garden. He's just probably going to sit there. Well, we get Dad in the program. He is like the most active guy. He's in the painting. He's bringing home flower arrangements. He's active in our gardens. Didn't even think about napping, okay? And was in a great mood while he was there. You know, that's the power of activity. It's the power of stimulation. Now, not everyone has an adult day program or needs that, but they need something, okay? And routine is part of that. So is your loved ones, are you sitting home alone, not doing anything all day long? And if you were in a different environment, would it be better? So that's kind of some of the reasons we might think about a change. Probably the biggest reason that we think about a change is the health of the caregiver, okay? So if it's that spousal, like they're together all the time, if something happened to that caregiver, the person with Parkinson's might be in tough shape. Or if that adult daughter that lives 10 minutes away gets a fabulous job offer 2 states away, it might change the course for life of that person with Parkinson's. So you have to look at what's it like for the caregiver? Is there a risk of burnout? And again, we want to intervene before we get to that burnout stage. So asking real life questions about how am I doing? As a caregiver, as a person that's really trying to look out for this person with Parkinson's, am I more impatient? Am I tired all the time? Am I crabby? Am I ignoring my own personal health? My shoulder is like constantly in pain, or my back is always, And so looking at those and asking those questions. If the reality is you're in rough shape, we got to figure out a plan to get you in better shape. And that usually involves other people. It's not usually just you by yourself. Okay, so it might, talking with your medical providers, including your own personal doctor to make sure you're taking care of your health, but looking at what resources might help you. Big question that everyone should ask, particularly even the people with Parkinson's. I'm talking a lot about caregivers up here, but what is plan B? We're on plan A. It's kind of working, right? But what if something big happens? A big fall and a broken hip. My spouse goes down, okay? There's other problems that can cause, but what is plan B? And even if it's not completely activated, how easy would it be to activate? There are many caregivers who might meet with a home care agency just to see what it's like, start a contract with them, not needing them right away. But then if something happened, they could easily pull that company in. Or people go tour places. They kind of have a short list of places they wouldn't feel bad if they had to move to. So they know if something happened, they could easily go to those places. Those are creating a bit of a plan B. Okay. All of this, as I stand up here, I told you from the beginning, this may impact you right away, maybe years and years and hopefully years before this has to be put into action. But all of it needs to be done with dignity. I have a tough time when a family comes in and they're like, Mom must move. And you're like, well, how about we talk about some possible options for mom? Moving might be one of the options, but what are they? And how were they presented? No one likes to be told what to do, right? Again, that's my whole, I've said it multiple times now, doing this early, having what if conversations and what would that look like? How would that feel kind of conversations instead of you must do. So again, keeping all of this in mind. Okay, now we're going to get into some terms here, okay? So I bring up some of this stuff because you believe how many people have questions on this. I've been doing social work for a really long time, so this stuff comes naturally, but a lot of people don't really understand all the different levels and what all these terms mean, okay? So in the second boxes there down, those are the different types of home care that could potentially be brought into your home. That first box there, personal care. So those are our hands-on folks. Life's getting a little bit trickier to get a shower or get dressed or change or to actually move around. Up from the chair is tricky. So you need someone to come in and help you with those. They would give medications. So actually doling them out of the pill bottles and passing them to you. Okay. That middle level is what they call companion care. So those are the folks that are going to come in to offer support to get you engaged and active. They could do some light cleaning. They do meal prep. They could do reminders for pills, but they don't do the hands-on stuff. Okay. These can work well for someone that is okay in their house, but just needs someone to kind of check on them. How's life going? Keeping you as active as possible. You can also, if you do move to a facility of some sort, but it's not meeting all your needs, sometimes people will hire companion aides into the facility just to better engage folks. Both of these two types of care are private pay. And the costs can vary and they have various contracts, but can be a good option for keeping people at home in their current environment longer. The biggest question, one of the biggest questions people ask me about this home care stuff is, what does Medicare cover? We wish it covered more is the basic answer I give people, okay? So Medicare will cover skilled care. So when you need a PT, an OT, a speech therapist coming into your house, you can occasionally get what they call a PCA or a shower aid is more usually the term that better describes it, that they will cover that if there is a skilled need. So unfortunately, what happens with Parkinson's disease is most of the time there's always a need, but is it skilled enough that you need a skilled professional to do it? Or do you just need someone that cares and kind of knows what they're doing to do it? Okay. So for most of our folks, it usually is after a hospitalization or a major health crisis that Medicare would cover something, and it would be relatively short term. So kind of a tough reality on what Medicare actually covers. And so it's just to kind of know that for the most part, it's pretty short term, and most people that do this for the duration, it tends to be private pay. Okay, so that's our home care. So those are, I want to stay in my home. How can I get help there? Now we're going to shift to where you know that it's just not working at home anymore and you need to think about moving. Okay. Now, as I throw these terms up there, there are a lot of terms that different facilities will use. Okay. It doesn't take long of touring this place and that place to know they have all these funky little terms. So I did my best to kind of cover a few of them, but just know that they're all going to be creative in how they present the information to you. So first one's your independent senior. Who might end up in this is someone who's been in their big old house with, 5 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms. They just don't need that house with all the yard maintenance. They just don't need that anymore. So they want to move somewhere where there's other seniors around them. There's activities. There's an occasional meal. A lot of times the rent will come with a light housekeeping every couple of weeks or something like that. There's often transportation, at least to and from grocery stores or medical appointments. No formal care is there though. No home care agency is built in. People can hire their own and bring it in, but you'll see lots of different titles for that. Whether it's a rental senior apartment, you'll see co-ops. Co-ops have been around for a long time. My grandmother actually lived in a co-op when I was in high school. So they've been, that idea of that kind of everyone buys into is a good program that's worked for a lot of people. Okay. But those are independent. Okay. Now, sometimes a couple might move into that where the person with Parkinson's might need a little more help. And again, they might just bring some home care in to meet that need. Then you get into assisted livings, and there's a gamut of assisted livings out there. Okay. And they're licensed, have a certain level of license under that assisted living auspice. They can provide a variety of cares. Payment is typically going to cover a rent base, and then there might be a care base added on. Okay, for some people, it might be where it's just a piecemeal. So when you push your button or that aide comes in to just help with occasional showers that you might need, they just charge you that way. So every time the aide comes in, they charge you for a 15-minute block. Other places are going to categorize you at a level. Okay, and so that's how you pay. So level A is this cost, level B is that cost, level C, et cetera. And so the tricky thing with this, when you go to look at these places, the numbers are all going to look funky. Like, why is this one so expensive and this one so cheap? Oh, I'll go to the cheap place. Well, once they start charging you, hit that button, or every time they come in, boy, that cheap could go up real high. So it's tricky. And I don't necessarily have a preference. I'm always just like, be aware is kind of my thing. But you can get a little with the one that charges you when you push your button. Some people don't want to pay that, so they just don't push their button. So then they're in a rough shape, like not getting help when they need help. So that one can backfire on folks too, okay? But it's just as you're touring places and trying to understand this, you need to kind of recognize the differences. Oftentimes, these independent and assisted can be on a campus, okay? And often on that campus are also this next level. These are all the different types of assisted living. Memory care, pretty self-explanatory what that might be. You're going to find people with various levels of memory issues. There is specialized training in dementia care. And there are some that have been trained in Parkinson's disease. I'll talk about that in a little bit. They often have a lower staff ratio. So one of the things if you get to this point and you're touring places, ask about staff ratio. What is it? What's the staff ratio during the day? What's the staff ratio at nighttime? So, it might be 1 to 5. 1 to 12, 1 to 17. And so if you think about where a person with Parkinson's and how much help they might need, will they do okay if the staff ratio is 1 to 17 or even 1 to 12 versus 1 to 5 or 1 to 4? So you have to kind of see what the needs might be for your loved one. Mainly staffed by nursing assistants and mid-level. The nurses, an RN will typically be not there 24 hours, but more on call. So for someone that needs a lot of RN, so like a diabetic who needs insulin levels or a wound care or something like that, that's more skilled of a nurse, sometimes these are going to be a trickier option. A lot of times in our life with Parkinson's, my experience is people are pretty darn healthy except for Parkinson's. So they don't need a lot of an actual skilled nurse. Again, they need someone that's kind, patient, and willing to give them the care they need. Next level is you'll see this thing called enhanced assisted livings or care suites. So these are folks that physically need more help. They might be some cognitive, but they're not full-blown kind of dementia. But again, they have a higher or lower staff ratio, meaning more staff on hand to meet those needs. And many of our advanced Parkinson's do quite well in these situations. Okay. The other type of level of assisted living is what they call residential care homes. This has been in practice for a really long time in the developmental disability area of group homes. We use the term a lot. It's essentially for seniors. And so they're very specialized. Some are very specifically dementia or Alzheimer's. There are some out there for more focused on Parkinson's disease. And so a lot of advantages. They're small, really good staff ratio. They can be tricky because they're just not as much space to move around or to get the activity that you need. So you got to figure out kind of what you need. And then of course, most people are familiar with the standard nursing home. They can, 24-hour nursing, so more that high level of nursing, and then different types of care. And then just knowing that sometimes people use these for rehab. You've been in the hospital, you can't quite go home yet, you need more intense rehab. It might be in the part of a nursing home. And then sometimes people use those for respite stays. Okay, so I've just went through a bunch of research or definitions of places with you. How do you start your own process if you need to start a process? Here's some resources. Senior Housing has an online directory. They also produce a little magazine. You can find those at most public places, libraries and such. We have a stack at Struthers that they drop off for us. Just to page through and kind of do your own little hunt, okay? Now, if you're more serious, feeling overwhelmed by all of this, there's also a variety of these senior housing locator companies, essentially like a realtor. They're free for you. You don't pay them anything. They actually get paid a stipend from the facility that you might end up in. But they will help you they'll sit down with you, talk about what your needs are. They can go on tours with you, show you options, give you nice definitions of what these different places are. They can be quite helpful. But here's my thing, buyer beware. Some of them are a little more aggressive than others. And if you kind of give them your information, they can tend to continue to call you. So I think there's good ones and not so great ones, but just sort of kind of being gentle with that. Sometimes it's better to almost give like the adult daughter's phone number versus the 80-year-old parent's phone number. So just kind of, there's my little tip on that. Then when we get to the point where you have to move, you got your spot, lots of moving assistance companies. There are companies that can come in, they will look at your new place, do the measurements, figure out what furniture is going to fit where, help you move said furniture, and then go back to the original spot, package it all up for you. They'll put stuff on, online to sale. They'll set up sales for you, lots of levels of moving assistance. And so if that all feels overwhelming and you have the ability to pay for it, I think looking at companies like this might help this process be a little easier for you. There's also different scales out there where you can look up how places have been rated. Now, the challenge with both of these, Medicare.gov and the Minnesota Department of Human Services, is they're mainly looking at nursing homes, okay? Certainly if that's the route you're going, if your loved one's going to move to a nursing home, look at the scales, see what things they're rating and how ones around you are rated. They don't rate assisted livings, which a lot of our people end up in. So that's the tricky part. So people are like, oh, I'm looking at these 3 places and I went to the Medicare.gov scale and I couldn't find them on there. Well, they're licensed as assisted livings. So that's, unfortunately, there's not, that I've found, a rating scale that does a decent job of rating assisted livings. The other little piece about these rating scales is they can be a little tricky. So some of our folks with Parkinson's, we know fall, right? When a person living in a facility falls, they get a bad ding on their rating scale. And so you're like, this facility has a bunch of people with Parkinson's, so their fall rating looks really bad. And so you kind of got to like, weigh it out a little bit is maybe what I'm getting at, okay? Okay, so one of the things I want to spend a little bit more time on, and this, because I'm very proud of it, is something that we created at Struthers Parkinson Center. It's been going for many years, and it came out, the history of this, it's called our Struthers Parkinson's Care Network. So the history has been, we'd have patients who have lived with Parkinson's for many, many years. Family made the choice to have their loved one move to a facility. Things didn't go very well at the facility. They weren't getting their meds on time. They weren't getting the exercise they needed. They weren't moving. They were just in a wheelchair, not walking with them. And it was rough. And so they would come to us at Struthers and say, the staff just doesn't understand. Can you do an in-service? So sure, we would go in there, do an in-service. Now people who would show up at the in-service would typically be the nurses, which is fine, but who was missing from these? There might be a PT, might be, who was missing was the direct care aides. The people that really were doing the daily care with you, that you want trained in this kind of stuff. And so so we do this in service, okay? Then we would go back to Struthers, do our thing. That same family would call us 6 months later and say, well, it's a whole new group of staff and they're not getting it again. And we're in trouble with this, we're struggling again. And so, we kind of figured out we can't just keep doing in services, usually for free, right? And it's not getting to the people that need it. So we created this program that is the company buys into. And so the reason that's important is you need champions that are going to say, we're going to train our staff in this and we're going to make sure that that information is spread out through the whole building and that everybody knows it and anyone new hires gets that information. So it's not just a one-time in-service type program, okay? We base it on the tulip. Everybody know that the red tulip is the international symbol of Parkinson's disease? Okay, so we took tulip and we focus on these things in our training. Time. We know the world slows down when you live with Parkinson's. So you need to give someone time to move, time to process, time to work through things. Understanding. There's a lot of differences in someone with Parkinson's versus someone who has maybe Alzheimer's or someone who has a history of a stroke or something like other medical concerns. One of the big things that we teach on is fluctuations. That how come she could walk easily and get her clothes on at 10 o'clock or at 8 o'clock, and now at 11 o'clock she needs bathroom help, like she can't hardly move. Well, that's the fluctuations of Parkinson's, right? And so if you don't have staff, we were getting staff reporting, she's being manipulative or it's a behavior problem. And so that's one of the big things we train on is that there will be fluctuations and they're not lying to you. They really do need help now, even though they didn't need help 2 hours ago. Okay, so understanding quality of life is giving activities. So many of the facilities in our program, they have a Parkinson's support group. They do a Parkinson's exercise class. They do an event during Parkinson's Awareness Month. Okay, they try to tap into some of the virtual programs that we do, all that kind of stuff, just giving better quality of life. Increased awareness. People with Parkinson's are given little red tulips on their doors. So staff walking into that room know that person has Parkinson's and they need to, kind of apply that information to working with this individual. Pills on time. We work with places to figure out how you're going to get Mr. Jones his 10 o'clock pill at 10 o'clock. Legally, they have an hour window on each side. So they could give a 10 o'clock pill at 9, or they could give it at 11. The next pill, if it's due at 1, they could then give that at noon or at 2. So we could have someone getting their pills at 9 and 2 instead of 10 and 1. So, we just spaced it out even farther. So getting pills on time and then support, just giving extra support. And like I said, the support groups and different activities. So we use TULIP as the main acronym and education resource. And then we do it by training different levels of staff. We have these things called site champions. Their job is to disseminate the information to the rest of the group. We have online training then that they do. We also do spot surveys. They're still virtual at this point, but they were going out and walking around and talking with people with Parkinson's, like, hey, do you feel like you get good care here and that kind of stuff. We survey the people with Parkinson's or their families. And then there's lots of education that we do. All rehab staff, if they have it at the building, social work staff, activity staff are all given professional trainings. Here's our numbers. We have 83 total sites, 66 residential sites, and 17 home care. We have grown. We started in the state of Minnesota. We branched out to South Dakota, then to North Dakota, and then in Wisconsin. And then do you know what happens to a lot of people from up here in the winter? they go south and they like this program. So we have a huge following in Florida. We're in Oklahoma, we're in Washington. A lot of it, what happens is we get people with Parkinson's who have a loved one that's the director of nursing or some high level at a facility and says, we want that program here. And so then we've been able to grow. We have corporations that we work with. And so that's part of how we're growing, and we're hoping to continue to grow. We recognize that people with Parkinson's are unique in their care and need that type of level of care. There's just some other numbers. 14,129 people have been taking these online trainings, and then it kind of breaks it down from there. So how do you learn more? You can certainly ask me, I'll be at the table, but our website, specific website for the Care Network is there. You can grab the full listing, and it breaks it down per state, or you can just get all of them if you want. And again, knowing that we have facilities and home care agencies. So we kind of cover a gamut of people living with Parkinson's. So I like this quote. I'm a big quote person. It says, the beauty of life is while we cannot undo what is done, we can see it, we can understand it, learn from it, and change. And I think a lot of times when I talk to people about living well with Parkinson's, how do I do this? How do I live well? It is being open to change and recognizing that even though it's crappy and you don't want to, you can change, you can stay optimistic and positive. Okay, that's why you come to conferences like this, right? Okay, that is my information. Any questions for me?
Joan, I have one from our online audience. How can you adapt your home to make it safer and easier for the person with Parkinson's to get around?
There's a variety of resources. So I'm kind of a Google online, but there's a lot of different online resources for doing it yourself. Though in the professional realm, we tend to recognize that occupational therapists do a lot of home safety assessments. So working with your medical providers. There are independent groups that can go out and do home safety assessments. Pandemic is tough on us all, but one of the things it's done is there's a lot of virtual care. So our OTs have been doing a lot of home assessments by having the person walk around with their iPad and show them different things and give tips and tricks that way. So I think that's a good place to start. If you're talking about home safety, my tip with that, or home modifications, my tip for that is to start sooner rather than later. If you know the goal is we are staying in this house, but your doorways are super narrow, or you have one of those galley bathrooms that are going to be tricky to maneuver around if you have to use a walker or a wheelchair, maybe it's time to make a bathroom modification, even if you don't quite need it yet. So that's kind of my tip there. Any other questions?
Feel free to raise your hand. Oh, I see one in the front.
Way in the front up here. Do you want to just shout at me and I can repeat your question?
Yes. Can you hear me back there?
I can repeat it too. Go ahead.
Let's say you're already in care, right?
Mm-hmm.
What something happens to her?
Yeah. He said his wife is his caretaker, recognizing how important she is, right? And he said, what am I going to do if something happens to her? Yeah, it's a big question. There's not an easy answer. But remember, I was talking about that plan B? That's plan B. And again, it's looking at if something happened to her temporarily, she broke her arm and couldn't help you, that's one plan B we look at. And maybe that's just we bring a little help into the home while her arm recovers. Then sometimes there's the more drastic, stroke, death, cancer. I mean, I've seen it all. Okay. Then we look at probably a more significant change for you. Maybe it's help coming in temporarily while we look for a different living situation. One of the key things is they're looking at who's in your support circle. Who can you call? And I've seen caregivers be very, very diligent about making this plan B. They create full notebooks and full binders of here's all the doctors, here's all the medication, here's our neighbors, here's our kids, here's all the people we could call. And they get it all laid out So if the 911 was called, that binder is right there. So there's kind of, you can be very technical and be organized. And some of us, I'm kind of a type A, so that sort of meets my needs. Other people are like, I don't want to stress out about it. And that's okay too. So, but yes, it's a great question. It's something that does need a little bit of thought. And the hope is to not get too bogged down and depressed about, oh, the future scares me. Just think of it practically, kind of have that hour of a meeting where we're going to talk about this. And then you put that on the shelf and you go do something fun. Okay. Anyone else question? I was so thorough that I just didn't leave any questions for people. Or you're all anticipating the break that's coming after me. You're like, I need to stretch my legs and go to the bathroom.
You had mentioned that some respite care for the caregivers. Are there actually facilities for that? So like if mom needs to or wants to go visit a friend for 4 days, but dad can't be home by himself and kids aren't available, like, are there places that do that or?
Yeah. Tricky. It's a tricky question. There are some assisted livings, probably more so. Some nursing homes will do it. The challenge, I think, for a lot of these facilities, though, is staffing. There's just staffing, there's shortage of workers everywhere. But and so I've seen a pullback on some of the respite options out there. And so a lot of it is how much. I've also seen where you can hire help in your home if that works. A lot of it depends on the need level of the person with Parkinson's. But it's not quite an easy answer of yes, this place does respite. A lot of times you have to do the due diligence of calling and like, do you guys offer respite? What's that look like? And so sometimes it's kind of looking in the area, there's 3 assisted livings, not that far. Let's call and see who might offer that. Or some of those housing locator companies, they have a short list of places that they're quick to offer for respite too. So I've also sent people that way. It's a good question, common question, because I think there is a bit of a need for break every once in a while, Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, that can be the case in some situations. So my services are part of the Struthers Parkinson Center. So I work with our doctors. I do general information. I'll do a quick phone call. We do offer support groups for people. So you could join a group. You don't have to be a medical patient to come to a group that are facilitated by social workers. Support groups are a nice option because you're hearing resources and learning from the other people in the group. Like, we're using this great company, you guys should try them too. That kind of stuff happens a lot in support groups. There are social workers that you can hire, sort of case management like services in the community. There's one called, their nickname Rent-A-Daughter. I just think it's clever, but there's many others. I don't want to plug one over the other. I just think their title is funny. And so that might be something that people can look into, but unfortunately, no, not every medical clinic has a social worker connected to it. Partly because it's not a bill, you can't pay, Medicare doesn't pay for it. So yeah, the company has to come up for the funding, unfortunately.
Could you talk a little bit about long-term care policies that have a home health component? And could you talk a little bit about that as far as when to initiate and who is it, medical professionals interact with these companies or whatever?
Sure. So many people were forward thinking, or their company was forward thinking, and they took the benefit of having a long-term care insurance plan. A couple things you want to look at when you think about your plan is who's the plan for. So sometimes the plan is just for one person and a couple. Sometimes the money is actually for both. So then you have to think about how you use that money. Some plans have a time frame. So once plan is activated, it runs for 5 years. Other plans are dollar amounts. So it's, $2 million. it's a great plan, but, and so, or it's $100,000. So that sometimes wagers in of when you activate a plan. But essentially most plans, you have to have, they have what's called ADLs or activities of daily living. And you have to show that you need support in maybe 2 of 5 or 3 of 6 activities of daily living. And so they're pretty basic. They're like, you need help walking, you need help going to the bathroom, you need help getting dressed. They're not like meal prep, cleaning, driving, which a lot of times those are the things that get tricky. And so if someone is at that level where they're needing that kind of care, I would recommend they at least get their plan and try to figure out what it offers. And sometimes that's going through the insurance broker that sold it to you. Sometimes it's, bringing in your adult kids to look at that kind of stuff and help you figure it out. I occasionally do it at Struthers, but so looking at the plan, trying to ask some of those critical questions, then most of them, you go to the company to activate it. The company then wants you to prove that your loved one is at the level where they need assistance. And so often it's a form filled out by the doctor that says you need that level of assistance. Occasionally it will be like a nurse or someone from the company that comes out and interviews you. If you have that, my tip there is to do it in an off time, because we know on and off, right? So you don't want your loved one looking great. You want it to look like the rough times, okay? I know that when many people come to the doctor's office, they look great. And their loved one is like, they never look like this at home. So do a realistic, like this is reality for us, okay? Anyways, and so then most of those plans you have to pay 90 days out of pocket. And they're not calendar days. Typically it's 90 days of service. So 90 days, the home health aide came into the house, or 90 days you were living at a facility of some sort. So those are kind of my general guidelines about long-term care. Did that answer your question? Okay. The light is so bright, I can't see like who's asking me the question. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Joan. That was such an interesting presentation. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I am pleased to introduce our third presenter, Jamie Engebretson. Jamie received her doctorate of physical therapy from St. Catherine University in 2009, and she has been a board-certified neurological clinical specialist since 2014. She has been a physical therapist for mHealth Fairview for the past 13 years and is currently located at the Edina Clinic. Jamie specializes in Parkinson's disease and is trained in LSVT Big and Parkinson's Wellness Recovery, or POWER. Since 2016, Jamie has served on the board of directors for the American Parkinson's Disease Association Minnesota chapter. And in her free time, she enjoys spending time with her family, hiking, and baking. Thanks so much for being here, Jamie.
Thank you for that introduction. I see some familiar faces out there, so it's nice to see everyone after the start of the pandemic and everything changed. So my name is Jamie Engebretson. I'm a physical therapist at mHealth Fairview, and today I will be speaking about freezing. It's not just a Minnesota winter problem. Whoops. Here we go. All right, so today I'm going to be just talking a little bit about the basal ganglia function. I know it was talked about a little bit earlier, so I'm just going to do a brief overview of that, and then get into freezing, triggers for freezing, treatment, assistive devices that are available, tips for freezing, and then wearable technology that you might have heard about. So I'm just going to talk initially about the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia controls multiple neural pathways, including motor, cognitive, and then the limbic system, which regulates emotional expression and mood. And so it really just sits there, and all those pathways run through the basal ganglia, and that's where all the modulation occurs. And then the basal ganglia is really kind of thought of as the gatekeeper for automatic activities. So gait is a huge area within this. Think of arm swing, step length, also initiation of walking, protective reactionary movements, and reflexes, sit to stands, facial expressions, and even swallowing. So the basal ganglia gets affected with Parkinson's, and that's because dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter, is housed in this area and it gets depleted. And so when that depletion occurs, you get a change in the amplitude and control of different movements that were automatic. And so as a result, a lot of the movements become smaller and slower. A lot of times you would see shuffling steps or gait, reduced swallowing, as well as decreased blinking and eye movements. And so unfortunately, when you then have Parkinson's, you have to think a little bit more about your movements in order to create that original motor output that was happening before you had Parkinson's. So from here on, I'm going to basically be talking about freezing, a little bit more of what it is, kind of triggers, and then stages. So research has really revealed that freezing is a motor issue. And it's not just with gait, but it also can occur with upper limb movements and speech. And for the remainder of this presentation, I'll be focusing on freezing of gait specifically. But freezing in general really affects just daily activities. It really can affect your interaction with other individuals, and as a result, really affects someone's quality of life. So specifically freezing of gait, Not at all describes it and defines it as a brief episodic absence or marked reduction of the forward progression of the feet despite the intention to walk. So a lot of times people may experience or feel like they're stuck or glued to the floor. Or you might see a limb that kind of tremors a little bit and you can't actually initiate that step. And typically freezing a gait is temporary and it's involuntary. Freezing can last just 1 to 2 seconds. And for some individuals, it can last more than 30 seconds. So it can be a really debilitating thing for some individuals. Typically freezing does occur with initiation of walking, turns, and doorways. Another term that kind of seems to be associated with freezing of gait is festinating of gait. And that's where you see this really kind of rapid small steps while you're walking or maybe even doing a turn. Those can actually lead into actual freezing where your feet are glued to the floor, or some individuals can kind of break out of that. But that's a term also that you may hear in association with freezing of gait. So I'm going to show you a couple examples because there's a lot of obviously definitions and descriptions for freezing of gait. So this is an individual I was working with. You can see he's walking down the hallway. I asked him to take a quick turn into a small room. He had a turn around, kind of slows down right there, hesitates a little bit when I say, oh, turn the other direction. You can see a couple of freezing episodes, kind of having to catch his balance. Kind of gets frozen right there. And he's then trying to start moving, and those feet are almost like glued to the floor. Kind of gets moving a little bit, kind of is able to get out the door now. And as he tries to walk down the hallway, there's another freezing episode. And then eventually, and you can see like the timing of those freezing episodes is changing for him too, as he's doing these different tasks. And then he's actually able to move out of that freezing episode. I have another example here because elevators can be quite challenging for a lot of individuals. And so here the elevator door opened. He's trying to get going. He is stuck in that initiation. He moves his feet a little bit, kind of a little fascinating. He's able to make a little bit larger steps. And he was actually able to make it out the door. And I don't know, let's just watch that one more time. Because if you notice, the door actually starts to close on him as he's coming through. So it starts right there. And that is a problematic situation for a lot of individuals. So after watching these videos, just by a show of hands, how many people does this kind of movement look familiar to them, or they've seen it in their loved ones? Yeah, so quite a bit of people here. And I'm sure a lot of people that are joined virtually have that same experience. So let's talk, oops, here we go. Let's talk about the prevalence of freezing. So as you see, it affects a number of people. When we look at just the spectrum of Parkinson's, about 26% of people that have mild Parkinson's experience some type of freezing of gait. And then as the disease process progresses, it can go up to 80% of individuals with more severe or advanced Parkinson's disease. So it is a more common symptom as the disease progresses. And so this is why it's kind of a really important thing to talk about too. And a lot of freezing episodes for individuals tend to occur in their off phase of medication. And the previous speaker talked about that big fluctuation of just movements and everything. And then can be that fluctuation with medications and movements as well. And so that off phase of medication or off phase is typically that when you're coming off the medication and you're about to start, you're kind of due for that next dose. That's kind of that more off phase. So if you do encounter someone talking about that to you, just know that is what that would be. And freezing, unfortunately, is one of the most common reasons for a fall in individuals that have Parkinson's disease. And we wanted to prevent falls as much as possible. So why do people freeze? Well, the mechanisms of freezing are still not fully understood. They've done a lot of looking at just specifically freezing of gait. And gait is such a complicated thing. It's just not, oh, if I can get up and move. There's central pattern generators in the spinal cord. You also have aspects in the brain that are modulating how fast you should be walking, anticipating the environment. And so it's a constant adjusting and processing. So it's thought to be from sensory perceptual deficits, as well as changes in executive function and attention that can seem to happen for individuals that have Parkinson's disease. So it's complicated, it's complex. And so right now there's not a quick, easy answer of why it happens, but here are some examples. There seems to be a loss of ability to automatically adjust to the environment. So slowing down for turns, speeding up in a crowded environment are some examples. Abnormal visual input. And so you might not see the door where your caregiver or your family or friends see it. You might see it just slightly off, or the change of carpet and that depth perception piece too might just be a little bit different for individuals. And then also there's just a decrease of postural control that they have found with individuals that have Parkinson's. And so typically a sense of or awareness of center of balance is off, and that ability to just quickly adjust and catch your balance when you do feel like you're falling off balance. So there are a number of different triggers for freezing of gait, and you can kind of divide them into two different categories. One's environmental, and those would include change in flooring. So going from like hardwood floor to a carpet, just that significant change, maybe not seeing the depth perception change of that. Doorways, like I had mentioned before, turns can elicit freezing, whether you have to turn around a corner, crowds, cluttered or obstacles, and also small areas. From a lot of times what I hear is people have a tendency to freeze when they're in the bathroom or in that small area. And that seems to be a trigger for them. Now, there also can be internal factors that create freezing. Fatigue is a big thing. The video of the gentleman that you saw before, that was one of his triggers too. So for him, it wasn't in the morning that he might not have as much freezing. It was later in the day, or if he decided to go out on an activity, it was as he got tired, he would have more freezing episodes. Stress can also create freezing as well as anxiety. They kind of go hand in hand. And then that feeling of being rushed. A lot of people I've worked with have had, they say, oh, my freezing episodes happen when I have to go into the store. And maybe it's the door, automatic doors opening and closing. And it could be that there's an individual right behind them that they feel like they're being rushed. And what if I have a freezing episode? Like, I can't control this. And so that feeling of being rushed then creates that anxiety and the stress piece in there too. So how do we manage freezing of gait? Medications in DBS can help. However, one typically needs to learn behavioral cues and strategies to help with these episodes. And in order to learn that, your rehab crew is kind of your best piece of the puzzle. So physical therapists and occupational therapists that are specifically knowledgeable and skilled for working with individuals with Parkinson's and movement disorders are those individuals that you'd want to go to. They can help identify external cues that you could use. And then also they have access to equipment that you could trial and to see if that does help reduce freezing episodes. Additionally, when you're doing therapy, it's a great place to learn new techniques. And so motor learning, these new techniques is really like their specialty. And then doing the repetition and continuously practicing in different environments. And the one great thing is I always encourage family members and care partners to come to these sessions because it's just helps when there's another person that can give those cues to help someone get out of these freezing episodes. So I keep saying cues. What are cues? So cues are basically feedback or information to help with movement. And they're important because they're one of the main reasons what therapy does to help with freezing of gait. The main goal for cues are two main goals. One is to maintain a normal gait pattern to prevent a freeze from occurring. And then there's another cue that can be given to help as like a rescue strategy to help break someone out of a freezing episode. And so those are kind of the main strategies that why cues are used. And they seem to help because it kind of redirects the attention to different portions of the movement or gait. A lot of individuals that have Parkinson's and specifically freezing of gait just have a difficult time weight shifting. And a lot of times they're trying to move the extremity that all their weight is on. So no wonder it's not going to move because all your weight's on it. And then the other thing of why cues seem to be beneficial and helpful is it's thought to shift the neural circuits from a habitual control to more of a goal-directed control. It's basically trying to take a detour route around the area that's affected with Parkinson's. So what are some cues? These are some examples of categories that could be used to help freezing of gait episodes. So there's basically 4 categories: visual, auditory, mental, and movement. And these cues can, depending on which ones you use, can be used to prevent a freezing episode, or again, like I said, help rescue someone from a freezing episode so that might not take as long to get out of that freeze. So example of visual cues include stepping over a mark on the floor, looking through doorways instead of looking down where that flooring is changing, picking a target and saying that's where I'm going to walk to, kind of that's the goal. There's auditory cues such as singing a tune or a beat, So having someone say march or lift your legs, or even a companion that's with them can, either just kind of snap a rhythm or kind of clap just a discrete rhythm if you're out and about. And then metronomes have also been used. There's been a lot of research specifically on auditory cues. And I will be honest with you, the research is really mixed. They've looked at whether or not a continuous auditory cue is beneficial versus having this auditory cue happen right when they would anticipate someone having a freezing episode. And what they have found in terms of research has been more of that continuous cue seems to be beneficial. However, when you look at the research, the amount of space that this person is covering is really a short distance. It's hard to really apply that to a real life situation. And a lot of individuals that were in some of these studies said, it's just so much concentration to focus on that constant cue. They actually preferred, sporadic cues when they would need to anticipate having this rescue strategy or a situation that they know are triggers to help them kind of avoid that freeze during that time. So there's also mental little cues or tricks that you can do. Imagine that you're kicking a ball to help get that extremity moving. Counting, like in your head, I'm going to take 5 steps and take them from point A to point B. For some individuals, a distracting question can be helpful. And for a lot of those individuals, it's more when they're in a freezing episode and they're maybe so frustrated that they can't get out of the freeze. And you say, oh, how many wheels are in a car? Like just a question like, oh, well, of course, it's 4. And then that just kind of distracts them enough to be able to get out of a freezing episode. I do caution people just decide to try that kind of distraction, just because for some individuals, distracting them as they're walking can actually create freezing episodes, just because there's so much mental processing going on just for this normal activity. And the last category is movement. So if someone uses a cane to help them walk for balance and they have good balance, they could kind of tap the cane down just a little bit to give them, just break up the freeze. I had one individual that I had worked with that would bring their arms out to their side and then back in and then move. And that would break up their freezing episode. Other techniques and cues that you could use would be to think about walking through the turn and using as much space as you can instead of trying to make this really small turn. You can kind of use this big space that you have. And I have a lot of space here. And then another thing that for movement is a lot of times if you take a step in a different direction, like a side step, and then be able to move forward. That is another way that you could use movement as a cue. So therapists that you'd work with would be well knowledgeable in all these areas that they can kind of identify which cue is the best for you. Now, there's also assistive devices that are out there that have been out for a number of years. These are 2 main ones. You have a laser cane, and that is the picture on the left. This cane has a specific laser built in so that if you push it down into the ground, a red light appears, and then you can step over it. It's really light. I'm sorry, our floor is dark in our clinic, but it's a red light that is right there. And you can see that individual there, it's kind of just coming over her toe, but that can be just that more constant cue that you could use to help with walking. And then there's also a U-step walker. I think I saw one around here. Yep, someone has one over at one of the tables. The U-step walker is a really unique device. It has a reverse braking system. And so when it is just sitting there, the brakes are on, and it is a heavy device. How do you guys like putting it in your car? Okay. And so it's a little bit heavier than a 4-wheeled walker. Like I said, it has a reverse braking system. So when you actually pull up on the handles, the brakes release and you can move. Also with these U-step walkers, you can also have a function added for a laser light. And I have the laser light turned on in this picture. It's really light that you can see, but it's a red line. I believe that I've seen, I think, a green line too that they've had on some of theirs. But that light, you can hit the button and it will turn on. And a lot of the newer U-step walkers, there is a metronome that will come and go click, 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 click as it comes on too, so that you know that is coming on. So there's like almost like 2 cues it uses a little bit. And then that light stays on for a period of time to help you kind of get going, and then it turns off. So talked about a lot of different cues and things that you can use. And I just want to be able to give you at least 4 basic tips that you could take home and you could use today. The first thing is if you get into a freezing episode or fascinating, and I'm going to see if I can demonstrate this a little bit with this big table here, but that fascinating is where you kind of go like these small steps. You want to be able to like stop, even if you're in a freezing episode and you're just kind of trying to get going. You just want to stop, stand tall, pull your walker back if you have one, take a deep breath too, because a lot of times people get frustrated. And then shift your weight, whether it's side to side, or if your feet are just staggered a little bit forward and back, because like I mentioned before, that weight shift is a big thing with trying to initiate walking. And so sometimes marching also helps, and then taking that big step and kind of moving forward. So those are just 4 really basic things that you could take away today. So other things when you think about tips for freezing and kind of to manage fascinating, it's really to be mindful of your movements and the tasks that you're doing. Slow down, be deliberate. I've had some individuals that they're like, I'm just trying to get there to point B, and they're just going for it. And it ends up being a little bit of a safety issue. And so really kind of slowing down, being mindful of what you're doing, getting a heel strike and whatnot. And then when caregivers or families giving cues, it needs to be kept simple and concise. Because if you give someone way too many cues, it's information overload. And so it's just like, what do you want me to focus on? And then the other thing that I always say is a specific technique. You need to kind of practice it multiple times to determine whether or not it's going to be beneficial for you. And unfortunately, the same technique doesn't work every time. And so learning a variety is kind of that key for that. And you might notice that, at different times of the day, as you get more fatigued, that's when these freezing episodes happen. And so having a good variety in your toolbox or your bag of tricks is great to have. So unfortunately, like I said, not every cue works every time. So why is that? Unfortunately, research has kind of shown that cues just have been shown to have like short-term positive benefits. And so, you have to use it a couple of times, but you can't constantly use it, which is why learning a variety is good. And then another thing that I have found that happens, and research has kind of showed this too, is sometimes individuals with Parkinson's disease just have a hard time taking what they learned and applying it to something else. And so just for everyone to be mindful of that. And so what I have experienced is maybe I teach someone how to do a turn without going that little shuffle steps. And we practice it in this situation, but then it's hard for them to translate it to turning to sit down in a chair so they don't fall into it. And so then it's really important just kind of be able to working with like your therapist to be able to translate all of those techniques to a variety of situations. And that kind of goes with what's called motor learning. And so, and that's why I mentioned motor learning in the beginning. And so then that retention of that new task that you learned just can be difficult for anyone that has Parkinson's disease. And that's why it's repetitiveness is what's really important with doing it. And unfortunately, with individuals freezing of gait, they have shown that retention of that new learning is also just a little bit changed too. So, and the theory behind that is there is a lot of cognitive demand that is placed on an individual to help normalize movements. And especially when someone's in that freezing of gait situation where you really have to focus on where my foot is going. Am I getting a heel strike? How am I moving in my environment? Should I be moving this in this entire space? And then learning a new task in addition with that just can be kind of a little bit of cognitive overload because there's not a lot of cognitive reserve kind of left for that. So the big thing with that is, like I said, learning a lot, having family members and friends know kind of what cues to also give someone. So I wanted to put a slide in here about technology because I know a lot of individuals with Parkinson's disease and their family members, you guys are so updated on the latest research and good at researching and figuring out, hey, what's new? Is it diet changes or whatnot? And technology has really come a long way in the last, 10, even 20 years. And so there's no new research that's been looking at different ways how to utilize this technology to help provide cues. And then these devices would be considered wearable devices. Now, there has been research on laser shoes where they're, I know, kind of funny. Little lasers are placed on the shoes and they project a line for the opposite foot to cross over. And so as long as you don't play laser tag or any other laser games with it, there's also smart glasses. So basically it's those clear glasses that actually end up projecting a image over your normal environment. And almost like virtual reality where the goal is with this kind of technology is to maybe be able to anticipate where in this environment someone could have a freezing episode and be able to project like an image or a line for people. There's also smart socks, and that's what they're called, smart socks. And currently with Parkinson's disease, they're smart because they are actually gathering information on someone's cadence, number of steps that they're taking, step length, and where they're kind of hitting down. They also have created smart socks specifically for runners. And for runners specifically, they have been able to make the technology happen that they can give runners feedback through their smartphones on how their stride is. Now, runner's strides is completely different than someone that has Parkinson's and what we're kind of trying to desire with that. So the technology isn't quite there in terms of giving cues yet. And then there's vibration socks. And this is where it kind of gives a vibration to activate or stimulate a muscle that is thought to help reduce a freezing episode. So activate those muscles. Now, all this research that I've been able to find really has small sample sizes. And so right now it's just really hard to apply that research to the general public right now. And the results are actually kind of mixed. For some individuals, it helped. For some, it didn't. It seemed like there was like this sweet spot in how often someone would get a freezing episode that it seemed to help. So a lot of these are still in that laboratory phase, and really more research is needed. But that's kind of like the possible next thing for helping manage the freezing of gait. So hopefully we figure out some new techniques soon. So in summary, freezing of gait affects, just that ease of movement and quality of life for a lot of individuals. It's a more common symptom as the disease progresses. And there are a variety of techniques and tips that can help with management. And remember, one size doesn't fit all, not only from individual to individual, but even within your own situation. And so that's why learning a lot of different techniques is important. And then also seeking care from a knowledgeable PT and OT to learn these techniques. And I actually encourage people to learn these techniques early. If you think back to what the thoughts and theories of what kind of all plays a role in freezing of gait, it's attention, executive function, and that sensory perception. And so learning how to address those early in the disease process, actually they're anticipating will help with managing freezing of gait later in the disease process, because you have more dopamine in your system and you're able to learn these new techniques and really challenge and strengthen some of these neural pathways. And I just want to let everyone know, like, as I mentioned before with technology, there's a lot of research, but there's just a lot of research in general about freezing of gait, just to continue to understand the pathophysiology and just ways to optimize management. So the UDALL Center has done research, American Parkinson's Disease Association, Parkinsons Foundation, and Michael J. Fox is all pouring in funds to help determine and try to figure out what exactly is causing freezing of gait and different ways to manage it. So I think we're kind of on the cusp of hopefully learning a lot of more new things about freezing of gait. All right, questions? All right, Irene has a question.
I've noticed sometimes when my husband, it's hard to turn, but the feet are just stuck, they're not shuffling around. The body wants to turn, but not the feet. So that can cause falls.
Yes. So the observation is that her husband, when he tries to turn, his feet almost are like stuck to the ground and his body keeps moving. Is that freezing? It is. And so there are techniques to learn how to do turns, and going to a knowledgeable therapist would definitely be what I would recommend. And if it's just that situation, that's like then learning those techniques to get out of that freezing episode. But that is a freezing episode. Some people don't realize like what they actually have this, because it's like, oh, well, I'm not that bad. That the video that I saw, it can creep up on some individuals where it was just really brief episodes too.
I have a question about, you talked a little bit about freezing of speech. Are those similar? And if you have one episode or one symptom of speech freezing, does that mean you likely will have the other?
Not necessarily. I will say though, I'm not a speech therapist, but for upper limb movement, a lot of times you see it in handwriting. But the speech therapist at my clinic has also seen it in when someone actually does have a change in their cadence of speech, or they have that delay or change. I think they're still trying to do a lot of research to determine whether or not they're fully linked. If it's specific, like if you have that, you might probably get freezing of gait in the future, or what the pattern is of when some people would develop these. But some people do just have freezing of gait and they don't have any upper limb issues or other symptoms. So I'm sorry, I can't answer exactly that question. Sure. Do you want me to go back to that slide? Okay. The question was to review the 4 basic steps to get out of a freeze. So I'm going to go back to that slide. So the first one is stop. Kind of think of the 4 S's. So if someone is in, like I said, a fascinating episode where they're like this, kind of moving, I don't want to go over the edge, you stop. Or if someone is in that situation where you're trying to turn and those feet are there and it's like, oh, this could end in a fall, you want to try to stop that movement as soon as you can. So that's why the first thing is stop. And then the goal is to then stand tall. So maybe it was this where you're stopping. You want to stand tall so that you can get that weight back over your feet, and so that you prevent a fall. And then the third S is shift your weight. And so that kind of just helps with that initiation of movement, maybe to help you get out of a freezing episode. And then step big. Any other questions with those kind of 4 basic steps?
Several instances, I'll be having a conversation with somebody, and it'll seem to me like I can hardly be understood. I'm talking so bad, and I'll stop and ask them. I mean, you understand this? Am I talking okay to you? Does it seem like I'm talking all right? And they always say, yeah. I mean, am I imagining it, or am I really talking bad?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. It's this possibility. They might just be nice. I don't know. But I mean, you could use some of the same kind of principles for this, at least the stop, when you are getting that quick breath, and stop, take a breath, and then continue talking. Now, a lot of speech therapists, when they are working with individuals that have Parkinson's, a lot of times they'll kind of train and work with someone on when they need to pause and take a breath, not only for volume, but also for pacing. So I recommend people go to and see the speech therapist, and at least get kind of evaluated, and they can really take a good look at that.
And we have a question from the online audience as well. They want to know, do you have advice for safe exercising if you experience freezing?
So that's a very broad question. And, you know, the question is then really how often you have a freezing episode, and are they occurring more in that off stage? So if they're occurring in the off stage and you can exercise more in the on stage, that would be a little bit safer situation. If someone is having a lot of falls, possibly starting with more of a seated technique, and then also really having an appointment with a physical or occupational therapist to really determine what specifically for this individual or anyone in general, what's the best exercise and movement that they should be doing. There's a lot of different techniques out there, modifications that can be made to exercise and techniques that are specific for Parkinson's. And so I would encourage them to seek out a therapist that is knowledgeable with movement disorders.
Jamie, I'm coming out of
one
nowhere.
thing, you know, just that whole on and off thing that I just mentioned, I always recommend that people come to therapy in different times of the day during their on-off cycle. Ideally, motor learning is going to happen the best when you're on your on time, but sometimes in the clinic, it's just hard to facilitate that freezing episode. And some people experience it more in the afternoon. And so I always say, you know, stagger those appointments out so that we can I can see you in different stages of the day and possibly different stages of your medication to really help identify what situations you're freezing in and then how we can best manage that.
Jamie, this is Jerry Vitek. Could you talk a little bit about recumbent bikes?
All right.
For the patients?
Thank you so much.
All right, so the next part of the event is our care panelists. And I want to introduce the person heading it up. Her name is Susan Vold. Susan is a board certified holistic and neuroscience nurse who manages patient care within the movement disorders clinic at M Health Fairview. She has an extensive experience in working with patients with Parkinson's disease. In addition, she is the clinical program manager for M Health Fairview's Deep Brain Stimulation program. She leads patient education classes in Parkinson's disease and deep brain stimulation. And a fun fact about her is that she is also an oil and pastel painter. So I'd like to introduce Susan, and she will be introducing everyone else on the caregiver panel. Thank you so much.
Hi, can anybody hear me? The mic is live, I guess. Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone to the symposium today. We're coming to the closing of our symposium, and so I'd like to get right to it. I had a whole list of questions to ask, but what I really want to do is get into the down and dirty of caregiving, okay? And these people up here are amazing panelists. We've got Irene Kuby at the end there. We have Nancy James. We have Lynn Schumann, and we have Marianne Mortensen. And the combined number of years that these women have worked with their spouses in Parkinson's and is just incredible. So the amount of wisdom that we have on this stage is amazing. So Parkinson's disease is a family disease, and it affects every single member of the family. And everyone knows that Parkinson's is so individual. You've seen one person with Parkinson's, you've seen one person with Parkinson's. Well, these are all individual care partners. So they've each had their own experiences, but what we're hoping to do today is to bring some commonality out so that you can take something home today that will give you, that they can share their experience, strength, and hope with you, okay? So in her book, Caring with Courage and Compassion, Susan Hamburger wrote, in order to come to a place of acceptance, one must be educated in Parkinson's disease. So I wanted to talk to Nancy first. Nancy, where have you learned about Parkinson's and how important was that in your journey with this disease? If you want to pick up a.
Hello.
Yeah, it's live.
Bill had Parkinson's for about 8 years because he had very fast moving MSA. We ended up having to learn an awful lot. I'm going to give a plug that M Health Fairview may not like, but we had the Capistrant Center. And so we all went to the same place to get our therapy. We met in the waiting rooms. We had groups, support groups that came together. Some of those support groups spawned outside of the regular activities, ladies' luncheons, so that we could talk about specifically what we were going through as individuals and share. Our last ladies' luncheon meeting had an interesting little discussion with audio visuals on different, what are they called? Condom catheters. Now, that's not something you're going to get in a lot of places, but hello, for the people that need it, it was really important. And we found that the group sharing has been the biggest part. My husband was a computer nerd, so of course we had all of the computer stuff to deal with that too. He did wonderful research on all of it. But use your occupational therapist, use your physical therapist, your speech therapist. Those people gave me so much information. Get a hold of your primary care doctor. He would authorize Bill to get follow-up visits with those kinds of people on a routine basis, and it was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Marianne, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about quality of life and what that is when you're living with Parkinson's as the care partner and how you might describe it for Gary.
My husband, Gary, he's had Parkinson's for 33 years. And when we first found out about it, we felt as a team, we had Parkinson's. And I bow and I'm honored to be in this room with all you care people and the people with Parkinson's, because you do it together. And Gary and I, as long as we could talk about it, we could figure it out, because we both felt we're good at figuring things out. And to this day, we dialogue quite a bit. And I'm able to say, it's really tricky today. And sometimes just saying it out loud, and he doesn't take it personally. And nor do I mean it mean. I just need to say it out loud. We have tried to keep life the same. We live in our house, and that will be our goal, to stay there as long as we can. We're blessed with lots of good friends and lots of family, though we don't really use them. What can I say? Our quality is, if it has to stop, it stops, but we're not looking in the future, deciding. I mean, when he could no longer ride his motorcycle, that was a bummer, but things will happen, but we're going for it right now. We're doing most everything. His quality of life is not to be in front of the television. You know, it's easy for him to sit down or close his eyes. Sometimes he wakes up and he's tired enough that he wants to take a nap again. So as long as I'm in a good mood, and man, there are some days I am the best partner you could ever have. And then other days where I think I need to find a person for him, you know, with a better disposition. But those are kind of our thoughts.
Thank you, Marianne. Lynn, if you had to talk a little bit more about maintaining quality of life, both mentally, physically, emotionally, for yourself and for your person with Parkinson's, what would you suggest?
Well, some of the things that people have talked about are just generally important. Having that support system in place. We have a lot of friends, especially through our church, and our daughter is a molecular biologist, so she has been invaluable when it comes to looking at scientific and technical research. She can understand it, whereas we are handicapped. So that's been hugely helpful. When Peter was diagnosed in 2013, we were living in a small house that had a lot of stairs, a lot of different levels, and we knew that was not sustainable. We couldn't stay there. So we figured out a plan as to, you know, what we needed to do to that house, to sell it, to find a new place. And we were really lucky. Peter found a builder who was building disability accessible homes in St. Paul in an old neighborhood. And that's been such a gift for us, because that house is so easy for him to get around in. It's very sustainable for us. We can be there for a long time. So that was a huge quality of life issue. We have our pets. We have 2 dachshunds who are a constant source of amusement. And that's, for us, that's just really important. And another thing we found that was really important was to get a vehicle that was tall enough that Peter can easily get in and out. There's no way he could lower himself down into a low car seat and then clamber out again. That was just never going to work. So that gives us a lot of ability to just be mobile. And finally, finding things to laugh at, including some of the things around Parkinson's when you're having a really, really bad day. Peter was at mHealth Fairview, which, by the way, that has been another resource for us. The care he's gotten there has been amazing. But he was talking to a medical student who was doing an initial exam, and she was being incredibly thorough about it. She was delightful. And at one point, she wanted to ask him about hallucinations, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But what she asked him was, do you see small furry animals? And the answer was yes, every day and multiple times. And the 2 of us started laughing. Luckily, the medical student had a good sense of humor, and she thought it was funny too. But now when Peter does something that's a little off or says something a little strange, I just look at him and say, Are you seeing small furry animals? And that's just what we need.
Thank you, Lynn. Irene, people with Parkinson's ability to do just about everything becomes impacted by their disease. Their emotional and physical dependence can increase over time. What healthy ways have you found to manage these changes over time? And how do you deal with anger, frustration, or impatience?
Well, it's been a journey. My husband was diagnosed 12 years ago, and I noticed things at least 2 years before. So we're always learning, always adapting, changing. But in the beginning, I said, we did take time off. We were still working and took an extended trip to Alaska with our motorhome. That was on our bucket list. And I said to him, I says, let's see what's going to change. And he said, well, I can't sing, but he never could sing. So we have maintained a sense of humor. There are days when I'm crabby and impatient, but I keep saying it's the disease. And I have to say Gaylord is very patient. So that's been a blessing. He's not demanding. How to handle the anger, frustration. I'll talk to a friend, a sister. Sharing at the support group has been very, very helpful. Sometimes I cry, sometimes I'll take a time out. Might be a nap, calling somebody, playing Wordle or Free Cell or reading, praying. We maintain our activity at church, and that's very helpful. Now I have become the gardener, the plumber, doing all these things that Gaylord used to do, but he coaches me and trains me. And if we do yard work, I take a lawn chair outside so he doesn't fall over, and he'll sit there. Sometimes he'll reach down and help weed, but just him being there for support, I'm learning I can do a lot more than I ever thought I could do. And so the roles have reversed somewhat, but we love playing cards, and we have some dear friends that we get together with often and play cards. And our grandsons play baseball, and some grandkids play soccer, and we don't like to miss a game. So that's been real fun too.
Thank you.
Oh, and then we have to watch Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. So we have our routine.
Yes, routines are good. Yes. Thank you, Irene. So one of the things I hear from different care, actually, I don't hear from the care partner themselves, but I sense burnout. When I'm in the office and I'm speaking with the family, and the care partner is just, you can see that they're overwhelmed. And it's just so very difficult for them to know what to do with being overwhelmed. And how does one know that they're becoming burnt out? Mary Ann, do you have any advice on that?
What's tricky is the things that work for me are probably the first things to go if there's a hard day. But I do my exercise, I do my stretches, yoga, pickleball, and I notice that if I have music in the house, it's the most bizarre thing. It puts me in a better mood. So it's really little things. But I also feel like I sort of overanalyze myself. It's like, oh my goodness, the music's on. I must be in a good mood. It's never the other way around. I'm kind of watching myself. But those are kind of the things. And I find I don't necessarily pray, but I talk to God all the time. Okay.
Thank you. So Lynn, do you ever have the feeling of that you have to do it all? Or you have to do it all the time? Or you are responsible for the world? And what do you do about that?
I think that's true for all caregivers, because as you were saying, our roles get reversed. We have to do things that normally our spouses did for years, or we have to bring somebody else in to do them. Until Peter got ill, We had never called a plumber or an electrician. He did all that stuff. Well, now that's not possible anymore. And I will say, honestly, I do not do plumbing or electrical work. No one would want me to. So yeah, it is easy to feel overwhelmed. I think you have to really be able to just stop. You know, if Peter's having a very bad day, we need to sort of get him through the worst of it. For him, it's restless leg syndrome. That can just be devastating. He can't rest, he can't sleep. He gets really crabby, which is not his normal way of being. So, you know, getting that calmed down and sort of getting past that is the first thing. And then I just might go take a nap or read a book. I read a lot. I'm also writing a book. That's my escape, because when I'm writing, that's where I am. I'm not worried about anything else. And Peter has helped me with the research of the book. I can bounce ideas off him. So that's been a really good project for both of us. So I think it's finding what gives you joy. And even if you can only find 30 minutes to go do that thing, do it, because that will bring you back refreshed and better able to just deal with this, because it's you know, it's very long term. It's not going to go away. So you have to manage it.
Thank you, Lynn. So Nancy, if you had to pick one tool that has helped you the most while you were being care partner with Bill, what would you say that tool was?
Oh, Lisa. That'd be hard to say. I do a lot of reading. Silly stuff. Bill and I made a list on the computer of the good things about Parkinson's. How else could you have gotten a handicap sticker? He loved that the girls at the yogurt shop would dip it up for him. You know, he got to indulge a lot of fun activities. It wasn't always easy, and sometimes I just had to step back and look at how far we had come along the process and then consciously accept that I just had to let those kinds of worries go because there wasn't anything I could do to change them. And once I did that, I found out I was much less likely to get angry at him for stuff that he wasn't able to do any longer. But it was a process to get to that point and say, it doesn't really matter. You know, this is just where we are.
Thank you. Irene, how has Parkinson's changed you?
I think it's made me more reflective and serious, because it seems like I'm always trying to stay ahead of the curve and plan and organize and manage appointments and take notes and such. But I came from a family that had humor, so that I think that saved me. The one thing I wanted to add was, remember the acronym for the word HALT. And when I get in trouble, it's if I get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, and then things can go downhill. But I kind of watch for that. So that's one of my tools, I guess.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We are out of time. And so I just want to thank these very amazing women for joining us and actually speaking their truth. And for all of you that have come today and that are online, you know, let's do this. You can do this today. That's the only thing you need to think about is the 24 hours ahead of you. So thank you very much.
Hey, Susan. Susan, I apologize. We had a mix up on time, so we do have 10 more minutes for you.
Oh.
If you want to stay, I apologize for that miscommunication, but by all
Irene
means,
wants to go.
if you want to share, you know.
Did my mic get turned off
No,
already?
you're live. You're
Okay.
good.
All right, good. Then we'll throw these away. Let's hear from any of you. What are your big questions? And we'll see which one of these women pops up to say the answer. Got one here. Question? Okay, I'm just going to repeat that. Humor is a big thing. What is your favorite go-to joke that might help you get through the day? Who wants to answer that?
I don't have a joke, but Bill found on YouTube a song called Blame It on the Parkinsons. And everyone should listen to it because it's like, you get away with a lot of stuff because you got Parkinson's. Just enjoy it.
Marianne, you were going to say.
If I really want to start laughing, I'll just look and say, hurry up, we got to get going.
That's great. Okay, right over here.
I'm still working full-time, and I'm wondering if any of you experienced the difficulty of knowing when to stop, or how that went for you guys.
Peter was diagnosed in 2013 and I retired from the university in 2014. So about a year later. And it was time. We had to sell the house. We had a lot of things coming up that we needed to take care of. I could not do that and work full time. So it was really clear to me that that was the right thing to do. Yeah, caretaking is a full-time job.
Anyone else? Over here? Oh, I'm sorry, Anushka.
I have a question. As a caregiver, we are early in a journey, and I'm finding myself and us struggling with vacations and how to deal with travel and all of that. How did you navigate in early years this idea of trying to get stuff done, get some joy and vacations in?
We had a small motorhome, and I guess it prompted us to get in the fast lane with doing the things that we wanted to do when we could. So we went for, 5-6 years. We'd go south in the winter. And then we did have a mishap with the motorhome, which totaled it. So we're done with that. And I'm still grieving that, but working through it. I think the one thing now, I'm not as comfortable with us traveling by ourselves. I'd like to go with other people or our daughters or something. So we did 4 years ago, we did take a cruise to Alaska. We had never done a cruise. And we mentioned it to our daughters and they said, we're willing to go. It was on our dime, but but their husbands stayed home with the kids and we had a wonderful time. So you keep adapting to what you think you can handle. We have a portable bed rail. So now if we go to a motel, I'll pop that in and, you take devices with that you might need.
We ended up buying the dreaded van. I hate that van. Terrible, but I could carry all of the gear we needed to go down to Florida. My husband was extremely fortunate. We had a service dog from Can Do Canines that made a huge difference in his quality of life, but I needed enough room to travel with her stuff, his stuff, my stuff. And we did make 5 years down in Florida and that was wonderful. But just like when do you quit work, we knew when it was time that we could no longer do that kind of traveling.
Marianne?
Well, we too have a Can Do canine. So I call our traveling now an entourage. And as soon as I know that we're going to go slow, this doesn't really help you, but it's my mindset. And in reality, people are nice. I can't even tell you how we just got back from California after being there 4 months and they open doors. Can I grab this for you? It's the simple things that truly make me want to cry. but it's almost putting a little bit more trust that in the world that's going to help you, because you really can travel for a long time.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more? One more. Yes.
How did you go about finding a support group, especially in the East Metro area? My husband's doctor is in the West Metro, and so she doesn't have a lot of information.
This is my big thing with Health Fairview. We were part of the Bethesda program, and so we had the Capistrant Center. They provided the support group. I have not seen anything from Health Fairview that is providing that yet, and it is absolutely critical. What worries me is, like, our group is getting older. We're losing people. I want to see these people that are just facing Parkinson's for the first time. This kind of meeting was what my husband and I went to 8 years ago when he first was diagnosed. And you really need to keep that pipeline, bringing those people in, bringing them together so they can do that kind of sharing. And I really hope that this is just the start of getting back into that.
You know, I do want to mention that we are here because of a lot of great sponsors, and the NIH, NINDH, and the APDA and Parkinsons Foundation. And Anushka over here, she would wave. Can anybody see her? Anyway, she has listings of support groups that are by city, who to contact. I think that Erin McGee also has information. She's waving over there. So those two organizations, the American Parkinson's Disease Association and the Parkinsons Foundation, are amazing resources to find support groups, to find exercise groups, to find virtual groups, to get all the education that you can. And it's made possible because of, like, Moving Day, the Parkinsons Foundation big fundraiser, or the APDA's Optimism Walk, and other wonderful things. And that's why we're here today. So I want to thank you all for coming. Thanks so much.
Marchie, because we got the virtual.
You want to go ahead?
May I just mention? Am I on? Oh, may I mention Margie Crone right here? Maybe you should just mention, because we do have the virtual Parkinson's support group after Bethesda closed, and that's part of M Health, and she leads the exercise. I think you should come up here, Margie.
Come on, come on. Just so you have 30 seconds. That's all you get. Whoop. Here you go.
Thank you.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah, I'm currently running the virtual support group for M Health Fairview. So we do have a group in existence, and we have some wonderful members that come regularly every single month. We usually have the first hour is educational in nature, so we have a speaker, and then the second half is, right now it is just for the care partners to connect with each other and to kind of learn from each other and support each other. There's also the Zoom fitness classes that we also entertain at this point as well. So sorry, I'm being put on the spot here and I'm not a public speaker.
You did just great. Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you.
For those online, we do have a poll. Today's program was offered in person and online. Please share why you chose to join us virtually.
As we wrap up today's program, I would like to remind you all to please complete your evaluation and share your feedback with us. Our online viewers will have the opportunity to complete the evaluation at the end of the program or in the next week when we send out a follow-up email containing the recording and other resources. Thank you again to our silver sponsor, Medtronic, for supporting today's program. And thank you for attending the Spring Parkinson's Symposium. We would love to stay connected with you. And the best way to stay connected with APDA is to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter. That weekly email has important information about upcoming programs. And we have some exciting educational events planned for this summer on topics including skin issues and Parkinson's disease, home health services, palliative care, and education and support for the newly diagnosed. We're also excited to announce a Parkinson's fundraising event at Unmapped Brewery in Minnetonka on June 22nd from 6 to 10 p.m. A portion of each drink sale will be donated to APDA to help with programs and services just like this one. And we're also hosting our annual Optimism Walk in Roseville on Saturday, September 10th. So between the educational events and the fundraisers, we're looking forward to seeing you again soon.
I hope everyone's feeling the energy virtually, in room. It's just so nice to be here. And I hope you're feeling empowered and educated after these presentations today. And also the fact that we have 3 Parkinson's organizations coming together to serve the Parkinson's community. This is a big deal. Sometimes we're siloed, but we are coming together to serve everyone here. So as we wrap up, I want to share a few ways you can stay engaged, as I hope you've been inspired or looking for that next step in your journey. You're already here. You're already participating here. You're watching online. So another way to be involved, we've talked about some research. The Parkinsons Foundation has PD Generation Mapping the Future of Parkinson's Disease, where we're improving treatments and care for all with Parkinson's. Currently, these genetic tests are not available or are affordable for people with Parkinson's and not covered by health insurance or offered specific genetic testing. Yet our PD Generation provides genetic testing for clinically relevant PD genes and counseling to people with Parkinson's at no cost in English and in Spanish. And you can enroll and learn more at parkinson.org/pdgene. This can be done in person at a clinic site, or you can get an at-home kit. So pretty convenient options. And we're going to come together in just a week for our very exciting Moving Day, Twin Cities, our largest fundraiser, which has been mentioned a few times. We're excited to be in Hildy Park in Plymouth. This largest fundraising event helps us continue our mission-driven work, providing care, funding research, and providing these free services to the community. So love to see you come out as a walker, donate, or just come volunteer with us. The energy is very similar to the connected community here in this room today. And lastly, we couldn't do this alone. We rely on volunteers, advocates, and fundraisers to help spread awareness and sharing resources to support groups, presentations out in the community, and events like this. We need your help in reaching everyone affected by Parkinson's to know they are not alone. The foundation is here for you. And yes, we are here for you. We have our wonderful website, parkinson.org, and you can reach out to our helpline specialists who are specifically trained and knowledgeable about Parkinson's. They're my go-to people when I get stumped out in the community. They are there to listen and chat with you on any concerns you may have. Thank you again for joining us. And with that, I'd like to pass it to Dr. Gerald Vitek for closing remarks. Who's joining us online?
Okay, I think, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I just have a couple of remarks to make for everybody. You see my slides okay? Okay. I know that most of you are ready to probably head home, but I just wanted to give you a kind of a shout out, a thank you for coming today. Whether you came in person or you came in virtual, your participation is really important to us because we learn as much from you or more than you learn from us. I wanted to comment, I was muted earlier, I couldn't talk about the exercise. If you're freezing, one way to exercise is on a recumbent bike. And these recumbent bikes are out there. You can purchase them. I'm not sure if you can get them through help with social work perhaps, but that's one way to do that. And you don't worry about the falling. A lot of this work's been done at the Cleveland Clinic, and we can talk more about that. But I think we need to work together to find, better therapies for Parkinson's to get to a point where we cure or prevent the disease entirely. I also want to thank people that helped organize this, Dr. Domingo, Alberico, also, our patient advocate, Margaret Sheehan, Aaron at Parkinson's Foundation, Nushka at the APDA, all the speakers, faculty, and staff that help make this possible. There's a lot of work that goes into this, kind of behind the scenes. Also, the National Institutes of Health. Without them, Walter Korschetz and Beth Ann Sieber, we wouldn't have the resources to have a UDALL center. And there are 5 of those in the United States right now. So these are critical pieces to the puzzle if we're going to improve our therapies. I want to just give you an example of the kind of work and the evolution. It'll just take a couple of minutes, but it's really important to know kind of where all this stuff started. If you think about stimulation, the Egyptians did it actually in 500 BC. They used electric fish to treat pain. So that's quite some time ago, right? In the 1700s, a guy named Aldini, he actually tried to treat insanity with static electricity. It didn't work very well, but he kept trying. And I think that's the goal, is that we just keep trying at some of these things. What he also did, however, was used this thing called a voltamic copper zinc pile on the bottom right of the screen there. He uses that. It's copper zinc separated by cardboard, and they make it wet, and they could pass current. And what you see in the bottom left is him treating a human body. The patient's dead, and he's putting current through the limbs, and the limbs would move, and the observers, as you could see, would have quite a shock when they saw that, and they would move away. No one really knew that the body worked through electricity. They had no idea. So this is almost like a body coming back to life. It shocked everybody that was there. However, 200 years later, chronic ways to give stimulation over time through these pacemakers was developed by a guy named Elim Louis Benabid. He is the reason we do deep brain stimulation today. He's in Grenoble, France. He is a functional neurosurgeon, but had a PhD in physics, and you won't find many of those in the country, that's for sure. But he published some papers in the 1987, 1993, and then this caught on fire. Not just for Parkinson's disease, but it's being spread across for a lot of different disorders now. So where has technology taken us? Because I really think it's important that you guys all hear about this. We started off with this lead on the left. That's the original lead. It's about 1.3 millimeters in diameter. That circle, top to bottom's about 1.27 millimeters. 4 metal contacts, that's the black. And we used that lead from the time we started doing this work, back when he did the work in the late 80s, up until, frankly, into the 2000 teens, about 2017. And then along came this directional lead that Dr. Miocinovic told you about. You can see right in the middle there. The middle two bands are split into 3. It's called a split band. It's called a 1-3-3-1. So that allowed us to put current in different directions. We couldn't do that before. And after that came another lead where actually you can pass current through each of those segments independently. You couldn't do that before. That red ball is showing how current can be moved up or down that lead. And it's going to show you how it can actually spin around so you can pass current in different directions. And here you can see again that current ball gets spun around based on what the better positions are for the current ball to be in. And then you're going to see a green thing appear, which might be your subthalamic nucleus, for example. And it's going to show you how if that lead is just a little bit off and not quite in the STN where it should be, you can move that current ball around. And then the last thing that Dr. Miocinovic brought up was this sensing. So these little kind of blue balls that you see, those blue things are sensing your brain activity, as she mentioned before. And we know that this brain activity is spatially organized in your brain in those targets. And there's certain parts we want to get, certain parts we don't need to get. And by understanding what the important part is to get, we can then specifically do patient-specific deep brain stimulation to improve your symptoms. And it might be different for different phenotypes. And that's important to know. So we also did this for programming. This programmer on the far left, that's the old programmer I used back in the 1990s. It had a dot matrix printer on it. It was slow. That little device in the upper right, that's a paddle you had to put over the pulse generator. However, now we know that we can do things through Bluetooth. You don't have to have things connected that way. And we also can do things, as Dr. Miocinovic mentioned, potentially remote programming with cell phones. So again, she showed you this earlier, but you can see on that, the far right side, the very far right, you can see that may be an iPhone or could be, it's going to be an Android down the road. And then again, we can see you guys as we're programming you. So you can do this basically remotely anywhere you've got internet control, and it's very secure. Again, this is not for prime time yet. People are using it. They're doing studies with it, and I think hopefully it'll be in place very soon for everyone. The last thing I want to point out is that this requires a big team. This is Latin for it takes a team. If you look at biomedical engineering, we use multiple faculty members in biomedical engineering, understanding electricity, currents, and circuits. Imaging, there was a question before about how do we localize? Well, we localize with a group that uses a very high resolution magnet. A Tesla is a term for the strength of a magnet. A 1 Tesla, 1.5 Tesla, what people typically use. Here they have a 7. In fact, they have a 10.5, but we use a 7 Tesla. And the question before is how do you localize? This is one of the best groups in the entire world for imaging. They give us pictures that are actually exquisite, almost like anatomy, which gives us a really good start for being able to put that lead in the right place in that target. Neurology, we have psychiatrists that are working with us now. We're looking at, can we improve cognition with deep brain stimulation? We have neuroscientists and neurosurgeons, obviously, but it takes that whole team to treat Parkinson's on the upper left, dystonia, upper right, tremor, bottom left, and there are studies, multiple studies that have looked at treating depression. So it takes a team to win. And you've seen this picture before, one of our patients before surgery on the left and after surgery, but it's a key, key for deep brain stimulation is like real estate. It's location, location, location. You cannot be off by more than a millimeter. Now, the team, it takes a lot of people. So we basically have 9 departments across 3 colleges: neurology, neurosurgery, neuroscience, School of Public Health, psychiatry, imaging, radiology, rehab medicine, biomedical engineering, and again, speech, language, and hearing sciences. All of these people are working together on our UDALL grant. So there are sleep studies being done. Some of the externalization studies that we referred to earlier are when the lead's implanted. We can sometimes record from an end that doesn't get buried under the skin. We put you in a special place in a different location, and we can collect the brain activity in different circumstances to understand what those biomarkers, that brain activity, how it relates to your symptoms. Specifically, it's where we can do some of the studies on adaptive stimulation. Those are all critical studies that we're going to advance the field. I want to leave this with you. This is a way to visualize your specific anatomy. This is work done by an old fellow of mine who's now a professor at Duke, Cameron McIntyre. And this shows your brain virtually. You can see the pathways in the brain and the structures in the brain that we need to implant the lead into. And this gets all brought together from the imaging. You're going to see an MRI of a brain that is represented here. It's going to be superimposed on these pathways. And this is the kind of thing that we're doing as we go forward to help adapt and develop this deep brain stimulation approach. What we're actually doing is activating these pathways when we stimulate in these structures, and we're understanding more and more about that and how important it is to get specific pathways. So that's where the field is moving to. But again, today's therapy, what comes from yesterday's research. And so we don't advance things for tomorrow unless we do research today. What we really need is you to work with us to advance the research. And that helps us to find tomorrow's therapies, helps us to do the adaptive DBS, to do the automated programming. All those things are being studied in our UDALL Center as well. Lastly, I just have to acknowledge 2 big people that we have all worked with. Many of us have worked with them, known through the years. On the upper left is a man named Malin DeLong. Malin DeLong is a neurologist and a neuroscientist. He is an expert in understanding basal ganglia anatomy and physiology. His early studies in animal models of Parkinson's are what led us to come back to doing surgical therapies. The man on the right, Roy McKay, is a functional neurosurgeon, also a neuroscientist, who worked with me and Dr. DeLong, you can see in the bottom, doing our very first surgical therapy, which was not DBS, but was actually lesion surgery. DBS started then again much later, back in the later 1996, 97 range. The point is that this work doesn't get done. We don't do the things we do today without all the things that have happened in the past. The work by Maynard DeLong started in the 1970s. So it gives you a good sense of where we've gone and where we've moved to. So again, I want to thank you all again for your coming today, for being available. We want you to work with us. If you have opportunities to participate in research, we greatly need people to do that. And again, that's how we can advance the therapy. So once again, thank you all for coming. I greatly appreciate your spending time with us today. Have a good rest of your weekend.